Chapter 1608. I understand. You may leave. Upon receiving news that the Xichang emperor and prince did not return to Xichang obediently but instead changed to Nanchang, Jiang Pengji knew what they were planning. Even though she had played a part in guiding them, the cooperation between the two of them was beyond her expectations. Xichang has been at war for a long time. These two must have suffered for a few years. Why are they still so ignorant? Jiang Pengji was rather surprised. Who didn't know that she and Shui were about to go to war? Under such circumstances, regardless of whether Jiang Pengji or Shui had the upper hand, they needed more troops as bargaining chips. They could not spare any strength to help Xichang, which was separated by Zhongzhou. They could not even take care of themselves. How could they have the leisure to help others? Taking a step back, what was in it for them to help Xichang? Don't listen to the Xichang emperor's promises of all kinds of benefits. He would fulfill them as soon as he restored his country. All the verbal benefits were fake. They were separated by thousands of mountains and rivers. Whether or not they fulfilled their promises depended on their mood. In the face of great benefits, so-called integrity, especially between countries, was nonsense. No matter how nice the Xichang emperor's promises were, they were just empty promises. In Jiang Pengji's eyes, they were not worth a single soldier. Wei Ci was helping Jiang Pengji grind ink. Seeing that a layer of ink had formed on the inkstone, the shade was just right, he said, food and lust are part of human nature. Even saints are like this, let alone ordinary people. There are many people in this world who take risks for beauty. There's nothing strange about it. Are you saying that the two in Xichang are confident in their beauty and think that they are worth tens of thousands of troops in the eyes of the feudal lords? Jiang Pengji expressed that she couldn't understand. She said, Xichang is so weak now. With these tens of thousands of troops and horses, not to mention the Empress concubine and the prince, even if the entire royal family were to be occupied, would they still be able to resist? Why do they have to make a fake marriage alliance? They really think of themselves as humans. Wei Ci was speechless. Even though the Lord's words were harsh and cruel, it was the truth. Without troops and with weak fists, who would take the mere Xichang royal family seriously? Even if they relied on their beauty to commit murder, they had to see if their backing was strong enough. The two in Xichang overestimated their beauty and value. Little did they know that in the eyes of the feudal lords in the chaotic world, they were just two goods and toys that had no additional value except for their faces. Jiang Pengji said confidently, Shui isn't me. If they turn around and head to Nanchang, they'll most likely be eaten until not even their bones are left. If they were to return to Xichang, they would not end up well. It would be better if Shui took a liking to them. At least they would be able to enjoy a period of glory and wealth before they die. Wei Ci sighed. Of course, everyone has their own fate. I will not sympathize with them. He remembered that in his previous life, Xichang was the country with the most feudal vassals within its borders. Their sacrifices in battle were also the most tragic. Usually, a feudal vassal would be replaced by another within a few months. At first, the royal family was the target of public criticism and was often treated as a monster by the feudal lords to farm experience and fame. According to incomplete statistics, from the beginning to the end of the chaotic era, there were no less than 300 uprisings among the feudal vassals in Xichang. The largest vassal ruled half a province, while the smallest only ruled a village. With a few hundred people, they could call themselves a vassal. The royal family of Xichang was repeatedly suppressed and squeezed out of their only living space. In the end, they holed up in a barren small mountain village. The other feudal lords looked down on them and did not bother to fight. In order to make a living, the emperor farmed and the empress farmed and knitted to earn pocket money. The concubines who had given birth and had not given birth were sold to the brothel to earn money. Because he was too idle, the emperor was keen on making babies. After a few years, he had many children. The more he was born, the poorer he was, the more he had children. The key was that all the children he gave birth to were beauties. In the end, he was reduced to selling children to earn money. Currently, the royal family of Xichang had the help of some loyal old officials, so they were not in such a miserable state. But in another 2 years, that might not be the case. Even though the children of the royal family of Xichang were really miserable, Wei Ci could not feel sympathy. He still remembered the scene in his previous life when the emperor of Xichang sent his 3 sons of a suitable age as tributes to the emperor to be his concubines. What the hell? The emperor's body was precious, yet he dared to covet 3 seductive little bunnies? He thought there would be no more drama in this life. He never expected the emperor of Xichang to send a pair of children over for a marriage alliance. Why didn't he see if he had the qualifications before the marriage alliance? Wei Ci had already predicted the outcome of the Xichang siblings, but he didn't expect them to end up worse than he had imagined. In the end, they only had themselves to blame. And Shui was not Jiang Pengji. Even though he had damaged his body due to the years of wandering and being unable to continue the family line, other than that, his functions were normal. Naturally, he had the needs of a normal man. The princess of Xichang was a rare beauty in the world. In a flourishing age, she would be the object of pursuit by the scholars of the world. In troubled times, she would naturally be the spoils of war that men fought over for power. The princess of Xichang had naively thought that by offering herself up, she would be able to exchange for troops through marriage. Little did she know that it was just her wishful thinking. They could obtain their bodies without paying any price. There were only 22 people in Xichang. They couldn't even escape from a slightly larger bandit lair, let alone in Shui, who was the strongest marquis in Nansheng. The princess of Xichang only found out about this later. And Duoshi, you're going back on your word. The next day, the princess of Xichang realized that Shui's attitude was strange. Her face turned pale. In Shui's eyes, the princess of Xichang was just a pretty face. She was a slave vase with no power or backing. How could he tolerate her calling him by his name? Shui's face was cold. He raised his hand and pinched the woman who had been fighting with a demon an hour ago. He used so much strength that it seemed like he wanted to kill her. After a while, Shui released his hand with a cold expression. The princess of Xichang coughed violently as she took in large gulps of air. Know your place, Shui said indifferently. You didn't learn from your failure with Lu Shi. The biggest mistake of the Xichang group was to overestimate their status as royalty. They forgot that their weight didn't come from the word royalty, but from the power that the royalty held. The Xichang royalty couldn't even take care of themselves. If a pair of children suffered in Nansheng, thousands of miles away, who would stand up for them? They couldn't figure it out. Shui had no need for men, so he casually bestowed the prince to Huayuan. I didn't expect you to have such a taste. Liking men wasn't something that couldn't be seen in public, but Shui hadn't seen Huayuan show any signs of liking men. Huayuan laughed. That person's looks aren't bad. Everyone smiled ambiguously at Huayuan. Only Lu Zheng, who heard the news, almost vomited blood. What kind of guy was the Lu Shi that demon Huayuan had imagined? He'd even imitated the real deal's weakness of being obsessed with looks. It wasn't a secret that Jiang Pengji was obsessed with looks. A little investigation would reveal that. Chapter 1609. If Jiang Pengji knew what Lu Zheng was thinking, she would probably cry out that she was wronged. What did he mean by, I've done a lot of ridiculous things? He made it sound like Jiang Pengji was a lone ranger. Didn't Lu Xiaoyin collude with her several times? Her relationship with Lu Zheng was not as weak as the outside world thought. In fact, Jiang Pengji's friendship with him was deeper than that of ordinary classmates in Langyi Academy. To be honest, they were probably acquaintances and bad friends. They had played together before. The two met at Jishan Hot Spring. At that time, Lu Zheng was not as calm as he was now. He looked like a lively and righteous young man. At the very least, Lu Zheng would tell Jiang Pengji, "We'll be classmates from now on. If anyone makes things difficult for you at the academy, you can tell them my name." Or something like that. But now? It was good enough that he did not beat Jiang Pengji to death. When Jiang Pengji was 12 or 13, she followed Master Yuanjing to Langyi County to study for 3 years. During the first year in Langyi County, Lu Zheng did not go abroad to study. He kept his promise and took care of Jiang Pengji. Of course, he soon realized that Lu Langjun was not afraid of trouble. It was good enough that she did not take the initiative to look for trouble. For example, she heard that a woman was beautiful, so she skipped her teacher's class to peek at her. Coincidentally, the local tyrant of a small town was robbing women and forcing the old man to send his daughter to the tyrant's house to be a cheap concubine. Lu Zheng was angry, but he was born in a poor family and did not dare to cause trouble. Only Jiang Pengji acted like she had eaten firecrackers and dressed as a woman without saying anything. Now that he thought about it, Lu Zheng felt that he was probably blind. Why did he not realize that she was a woman at that time? Jiang Pengji disguised herself as a woman and entered the house. Not only did she beat up the local tyrant, but she also grabbed his parents and hung them on the beam of the house. She used straw ropes to whip them. While she whipped them, she asked them if they were ashamed and if they knew they were wrong. She also asked if the local tyrant's father had entered the pigsty by mistake 18 years ago. She also asked the local tyrant's mother if there was anyone with the surname Wang next door. Jiang Pengji's mother Lu Zheng and a few students who skipped class leaned on the low wall and watched Jiang Pengji get rid of the tyrant. This won't kill anyone, right? Can a straw rope kill someone? Lu Zheng said, "Isn't the point that this kid has a vicious mouth?" His classmate said with lingering fear, "It's indeed a bit vicious. Even a shrew on the street wouldn't be able to come up with so many tricks." Lu Zheng fished out a handful of melon seeds from somewhere. His 4 classmates leaned against the low wall and watched Jiang Pengji beat them. The shells of the melon seeds fell to the ground. By the time she was done, the servant who had gone to the government office to report the case had also arrived with the bailiffs. The 5 of them picked up their clothes and slipped away. "You were the one who beat him up, so why should we help you escape? If Mr. finds out, he'll be in deep trouble." Jiang Pengji said matter-of-factly, "If I can't escape, I'll rat you out and say that you instigated me to do it." Among the 5 of them, the oldest was already in his 20s, and the youngest, Jiang Pengji, was only 13 years old. Most importantly, she looked harmless. Lu Zheng said, "You've caused a lot of trouble for them. Today you're standing up for that farmer father and daughter, but tomorrow they'll be in big trouble." Jiang Pengji sneered. "What are you afraid of?" Lu Zheng had an ominous premonition. As expected, as soon as that family showed signs of taking revenge, Jiang Pengji skipped class to beat them up. She tortured the family until they were bald. In the end, they couldn't afford to offend them, so they moved back to their hometown with their tails between their legs. Even the local gangsters in the neighborhood didn't dare to bully the father and daughter anymore. It's not enough to simply stand up for them. We have to ensure the quality of the after-sales service so that the victims can rest assured. Lu Zheng was speechless. Fighting for justice was a small matter. She was good at making people seethe with anger at all kinds of elegant poetry gatherings. Looking at the children of the aristocratic families in Langyi County, there was almost no one who hadn't been rebuked by Jiang Pengji. If there was, it was mostly because the other party was too weak and she looked down on them. How did the news of Jiang Pengji's beauty complex spread? It turned out that Jiang Pengji had visited all the red light districts and alleys in Langyi County. She knew which place had good-looking girls, which place had nice decorations, which place had delicious food, which place had good wine. She was very familiar with them. At first, people thought that she was a playboy with an unrestrained private life. Until someone invited her to visit a brothel, they found out that she only hugged and did not stay for the night. If you don't stay for the night, then what's so interesting about staying here? Sure enough, he was still a young man who didn't know anything. Only children liked good wine and delicacies. Adults preferred to have big breasts. Jiang Pengji answered, "They are good-looking, but I only look at good-looking people. The other ugly ones will dirty my eyes." A playboy with bad intentions said, "The young Lang Jun from XX's family is good-looking. Why don't you go to see him?" The young Lang Jun from XX's family was also famous in Langi County for being a good-looking man with a pretty face. He was a good-looking man with a pretty face. Apart from killing people, he had been involved in all kinds of bad things. Lu Zheng heard the hidden meaning in his words. He knew that the playboy wanted to instigate Jiang Pengji to cause trouble, so he wanted to stop him. Who knew that he would throw a firecracker into the latrine in the backyard that night and blow up the young Lang Jun? Turning her head, she framed the hedonistic young master who had instigated her and cleared herself of all the blame. Throwing firecrackers into the latrine in the backyard? How did you come up with such a bad idea? Lu Zheng felt disgusted just thinking about the scene. He couldn't tell that the idea was thought up by the handsome young man in front of him. "The night is long and I can't sleep, you can't sleep, so you blow up the latrine? I'd rather you sleep with the ladies. I didn't go alone. Who else did you find?" "Except for you, I found the other three." Lu Zheng was speechless. "Xiaofan, it's a pity that you didn't see it." "Don't. I'm glad that I didn't see it. Otherwise, I won't be able to eat for the next month or two." Other than blowing up latrines, he had done many heroic deeds, such as holding a grudge. She remembered that when Jiang Pengji first came to Langi County, she was humiliated by a member of the aristocratic family. She didn't react at that time. Half a year later, the Lang Jun got married. He tied up the bride and hid her in a perforated dowry box. Then, he replaced the bride with a gangster who had a fetish for longing for men. He gave them an overdose of drugs and they fooled around for a night. Lu Zheng and the others were dragged to a corner by her and eavesdropped on them for half an hour. Oh, the bride was there too. The next day, the bride angrily asked for a marriage certificate and left to marry her lover. "Did he offend you?" Lu Zheng didn't know that the unlucky guy had offended Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji said matter-of-factly, "He was the one who humiliated me half a year ago." "Half a year ago, you're too vengeful. It's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. That's what the saints say. I've only remembered it for half a year." Jiang Pengji said sternly and righteously, "Moreover, I have evidence of his father's corruption and bribery. I'm prepared to destroy his entire family. I can't just watch an innocent girl marry into their family and be implicated, can I? Saving a life is better than building a 7-storied pagoda. You don't understand." Lu Zheng was speechless. Which saint would be so angry that he would jump out of his coffin? Chapter 16:10. Logically speaking, Lu Zheng and Jiang Pengji's friendship was not shallow. Why was Lu Zheng indifferent when Jiang Pengji conquered the world? It was easy to understand. In Lu Zheng's eyes, Jiang Pengji conquered the world and beat other princes everywhere. It was the same as when she blew up people's latrines in the middle of the night. As someone who knew Jiang Pengji's mischievous side, Lu Zheng could not accept that his lord was invincible with words, whipping people with straw ropes, blowing up people's latrines in the middle of the night, kidnapping the bride and forcing the groom to turn gay. It was fine if one was not frivolous, but Jiang Pengji's dark history was really too much. If Lu Zheng became Jiang Pengji's aide, he was not sure if she would kill him to silence him if she was unhappy, or if she would drag him to do more unreliable things. Regardless of the former or the latter, it was not what Lu Zheng wanted to see. In fact, when Lu Zheng heard that Wei Ci sought refuge with Jiang Pengji, he felt pity for him. This child's chrysanthemum was about to be destroyed. Why did he say that? Lu Zheng and Jiang Pengji had a good relationship in the past. The two of them and 3 other friends who got along well often went out to play. One time, Lu Zheng found out that Jiang Pengji had not returned from hunting for a long time. He was worried and went out to look for her. He found her sitting on the cliff and overlooking the stream dozens of feet away. Lu Zheng did not dare to make a sound and disturb her, for fear that she would fall off the cliff and die in fear. He didn't ask until Jiang Pengji discovered his tracks. "What are you looking at here?" The young man with a high ponytail smiled and said, "A beauty coming out of the bath." Lu Zheng's eyes were fixed on her. He said in disbelief, "Who would bathe outside in the wilderness?" The young man turned her head and the ends of her hair flew in an arc in the air. She supported her chin with one hand and said, "Zixiao is a beauty." Lu Zheng laughed and scolded, "You really know how to court death. With Zixiao's temperament, if you provoke him, he can kill you." Everyone in Langyi Academy knew that Wei Ci hated people talking about his appearance. The young man in front of him was not afraid of death and dared to tease Wei Ci. Besides, Wei Ci had gone out to visit a friend half a month ago and was not in Langyi County at all. Did she have clairvoyance? How could she see people bathing? The young man smiled and said, "All right, he's not bathing, but I saw him washing his feet by the stream." "Really, a beauty washing her feet looks good too," Lu Zheng said, stubborn. He did not take the matter to heart. After all, everyone knew that Jiang Pengji was a shameless person who only cared about appearances. After a period of time, Lu Zheng left to study abroad. Before he left, Jiang Pengji invited him to Langyi County's Wangshan Pavilion for a drink. The two of them had drunk quite a lot of wine, and the ground was covered with wine jars. At this moment, Zheng vaguely heard Wei Ci's slightly embarrassed and annoyed voice coming from behind the dense thicket. Listening carefully, it turned out that a certain scholar was pestering Wei Ci. His behavior was frivolous and his words were impetuous. One could tell at a glance that he was a bad person. Jiang Pengji lifted the wine jar and gave him a good beating. Wei Ci glanced at Lu Zheng, who followed closely behind, and left Wangshan Pavilion without saying anything. Why did he leave? I'm still waiting for him to devote himself to me. Isn't this the plot of a hero saving a damsel in distress? Zheng scolded jokingly, "Come on, Zixiao doesn't have any sexual fetishes. Don't covet him." Jiang Pengji said, "Believe it or not, Wei Zixiao is interested in me." Zheng said, "It's faster in your dreams." Jiang Pengji said, "He looks down on my charm. How about we bet on this?" "Bet on what?" Jiang Pengji said, "If Zixiao becomes mine in the future, under the premise that it doesn't violate the morality of a gentleman, you have to agree to one of my requests." Zheng hesitated and asked, "This request isn't to be in cahoots with you. You kill people and I'll hand over the knife, right?" Jiang Pengji said, "As a member of the F5 Heavenly Group of Langyi Academy, why are your thoughts so dishonest?" At first, Zheng did not know what the Love 5 Heavenly Group was. He was confused when he heard it. Jiang Pengji said that it was a group with similar interests, so he understood and tacitly agreed to be a cult. "Don't worry, don't think so badly. Maybe one day I'll become a minister and be conferred the title of king or marquis. I'll let you work for me. With me as the leader of the F5 Heavenly Group, I'll definitely share some soup with you. I'll guarantee you a lifetime of glory, splendor, and wealth. Thinking about it, don't you think I'm very loyal?" Zheng wanted to beat the brat to death. "You eat the meat and I drink the soup. Lu Lanting, you brat, who gave you the courage to say that? To hell with similar interests. What Love 5 Heavenly Group? just cut ties with them. All signs showed that Jiang Pengji had been coveting Wei Ci for a long time. However, a gentleman did not comment on other people's quarrels. LV Zheng could not keep Wei Ci away from Jiang Pengji without evidence. Taking a step back, Wei Ci was a student in his 20s and had long since left Langjia Academy. He did not have much interaction with Jiang Pengji. He never expected that, after many years, Jiang Pengji, the brat, would no longer harm Langjia County. Instead, she would harm the world. Wei Zixiao did not choose the feudal vassals but chose the brat who coveted his chrysanthemum. This was probably fate. When LV Zheng heard that Jiang Pengji was causing trouble, he did not go to his old classmate. Instead, he slipped away with his boy servant. He was afraid of Jiang Pengji. He was afraid that one day he would receive news of her forcing Wei Ci, but he was also afraid that she would use her promise to make him drink soup. Later, when Jiang Pengji announced her identity as a woman to the world, LV Zheng avoided her even more. He could not imagine that the brat who was invincible with words, who could whip people with straw ropes, who blew up latrines in the middle of the night, who kidnapped the bride and forced the groom to be gay, was actually a woman. The scholars in Langjia County would avoid her when they saw her. I'm afraid they'll be worried to death. LV Zheng pitied the people in Jiang Pengji's camp. As the saying went, it was easier to change a leopard than a leopard. With such an unreliable lord, he was afraid that he would go bald from worry. When LV Zheng found out that Hua Yuan had imagined a Lu Shi personality, he panicked. No one could stop that woman from courting death. After carefully observing for a while, he realized that compared to the original, Hua Yuan was quite normal. Rather than saying that Hua Yuan had imagined a Lu Shi, it would be more accurate to say that he had imagined a Lu Shi that he thought he was. Was it because Hua Yuan's essence was not high enough, or was it because the original's personality was too difficult to replicate? Different people saw different things. Preparing for war was too boring, and LV Zheng was gradually made a figurehead by Hua Yuan. To him, time passed slowly. With nothing to do, LV Zheng calmed down and picked up the calligraphy that had been neglected for many years. Occasionally, he listened to his boy servant talk about gossip to kill time. There were many types of gossip. Among them, gossip about love affairs was the easiest to spread. For example, when his lord, An Shui, was having a banquet, someone said, "I heard that the princess's dancing skills are outstanding." He ordered the princess of Xichang to dance in a thin shirt to liven things up. For example, Hua Yuan liked the prince's boy toy. All kinds of gossip made LV Zheng frown. "Master, there is a guest outside the residence. He claims to be your old friend." "Old friend? Who?" The boy servant said, "That person's surname is Fang." "Fang? Old friend?" After thinking about it, there was only one old friend with the surname Fang. Chapter 1611. This old friend was not an outsider. Lu Zheng was acquainted with him. His surname was Fang and his given name was Ji. His courtesy name was Byuku. He was from Zhangzhou's Dongmen County. When he was young, he went to Langyi County to study for several years. "What kind of wind blew today to bring you here?" Lu Zheng tidied up a little and went to meet the guest. As soon as he entered, he saw a familiar face. Fang Ji smiled and tidied his clothes. He got up and bowed to Lu Zheng. The two of them were worlds apart. Fang Ji was a teacher who lived in seclusion in the countryside, while Lu Zheng was a counselor working for a feudal lord. He came with a mission, so he did not dare to provoke Lu Zheng. "We've been classmates for several years. Do you have to be interrogated when you come to visit?" It's been years. Xiaoyin is better than before." Although Fang Ji had a square face and looked righteous and awe-inspiring, Lu Zheng knew that under his decent appearance, there was a wicked heart. They had not contacted each other in recent years. One would not visit for no reason. Since Fang Zhi came to visit at this time, Lu Zheng had to be careful. Most importantly, Fang Zhi's ancestral home was Zhangzhou's Dongmen County. Zhangzhou was now in Jiang Pengji's hands. Therefore, Fang Zhi's purpose of visit was thought-provoking. Despite his suspicions, Lu Zheng did not expose him. Instead, he followed Fang Zhi's topic and began to reminisce about their youth. For both Fang Zhi and Lu Zheng, the time when they were teenagers studying was always particularly beautiful. Even if Jiang Pengji was added to this beautiful time, it was still a memory of their youth. The two of them talked about their respective situations and sighed endlessly. Not everyone who went to Langi Academy to study was talented. For example, Fang Zhi's talent was very mediocre. After he finished studying, he returned to his hometown to be a teacher and earn some money to support his students. In recent years, the outside world was in chaos. Fang Zhi's small private school was also affected. It was difficult for the people to make ends meet. How could they afford to send their children to a private school to study and learn? Therefore, Fang Zhi lost his job. Although he lost his job, Fang Zhi was not very pessimistic. Compared to the homeless refugees and people in troubled times who had lost their families, he at least had a small house to shelter him from the rain and he could eat his fill. In the worst-case scenario, he still had other ways out, such as relying on his classmates. Most of the students who graduated from Langi Academy had a good life. Some of them had joined the feudal vassals and were doing very well, while some of them were small officials in small places. If Fang Zhi chose to rely on his schoolmates, he would be able to live a decent life, even if he did not have a small fortune. The aristocratic families formed a huge network of power through their bloodlines, and the students who came from the same academy relied on their friendship. The latter was not as obvious as the former, but it was still an invisible force that could not be underestimated. Therefore, Fang Zhi was very calm. However, he quickly lost his composure. Why? He lived in seclusion in a small rural town. His house was built with the help of nearby villagers. The quality of the house was quite good, but no matter how good the quality was, it could not withstand the ravages of mudslides. Fortunately, when the mountain collapsed and formed a landslide, Fang Zhi brought his wife and son out to purchase daily necessities. Apart from the chickens and ducks in the kitchen, there were no other casualties in the family. He was lucky, but the villagers nearby were not so lucky. The mud road leading to the outside world was washed away by the landslide, and the village was almost isolated from the outside world. The mountains were barren, and the weather was getting colder. The rice stored in the homes of the people was not enough for them to survive the winter, so they had to find someone to clear the road again. For this matter, Fang Zhi could only think of a way to find someone in the outside world, but he encountered a recruitment drive. Of course, Fang Zhi was not recruited to be a soldier, but he heard that the master of Zhangzhou had been replaced by his former classmate. Fang Zhi was speechless. When did this happen? Wasn't Yang Tao in power a few months ago? News in the countryside was blocked, and Fang Zhi did not have the ability to intervene in the world's general situation. Naturally, he did not care much, and the news was not timely enough. However, it was definitely beneficial for his former classmate to be in power, so Fang Zhi shamelessly begged to meet him and borrow someone to clear the mountain road again. Jiang Pengji heard that he was a member of the F5 Heavenly Group, so of course she agreed. However, Fang Zhi and Jiang Pengji were not as happy as others expected when they reunited with their former classmate. It could not be helped, it was awkward. Lu Zheng only heard that Jiang Pengji blew up the latrine the next day, but he was an accomplice who went out with Jiang Pengji to blow up the latrine. The classmate who blew up the latrine back then had suddenly become the ruler of the world. How could he face it with a smile so that he would not appear awkward? It was quite urgent. Fang Zhi was embarrassed, but Jiang Pengji was so calm that no one could tell her emotions. While they were chatting, she asked Fang Zhi how he had been in recent years. Hearing that the private school that Fang Zhi opened had no students enrolled and was closed, she asked, "Are you willing to go to Wanzhou?" Fang Zhi did not understand. "You are now teaching at the Jinlin Academy in Wanzhou. You have a solid foundation, why don't you apply for a position as a teacher?" Jiang Pengji said, "You are idle here, but it is a waste of time. Ordinary farmers can't even keep themselves warm and fed, how can they have spare money to educate their children?" The Jinlin Academy was one of the projects that Jiang Pengji valued the most. She had been investing in its expansion all these years, and there had always been a shortage of teachers with a solid foundation and a good character. Fang Zhi was indeed very mischievous when he was young, but his character was not bad. He was as upright as his name suggested. If Fang Zhi went to teach at the Jinlin Academy, Jiang Pengji could protect him and help Master Yuanjing share some of the pressure. Fang Zhi was silent for a while before he said, "What Master Lanting said is true, but," Jiang Pengji knew what he was hesitating about. The atmosphere at the Langyi Academy was good in the past, and Master Yuanjing treated everyone equally. Very few students felt that they were neglected or that they were born inferior. If not for that, Lu Zheng and a few students from humble backgrounds would not have been able to mingle so well with Jiang Pengji. However, there was a time limit to studying. Once they left the Langyi Academy, the benefits brought by the students' original families would be exposed. It was not that Fang Zhi did not try to become an official. Firstly, he was not cut out for it, and it would be difficult for him to achieve anything as an official. Secondly, he did not have the means to become an official, so he could only go to the countryside to teach, in an attempt to let more ambitious farmers become literate and change their lives of poverty. Fang Zhi was not famous, and the private school that he opened was also unknown. The rich families did not fancy it, and the ordinary people could not afford it. In the end, Fang Zhi could only pay for it, and he barely had a few students. There was a fierce war outside, and the few students were called back by their parents to farm and support their families. There's still some time before Zhangzhou becomes stable. It's fine for you to stay here, but will your wife and children be able to take it? Fang Zhi was not a pretentious person. Although he was a little chinibu when he was young, he became more mature when he was middle-aged. It's a luxury to find a place to settle down in these troubled times. Fortunately, Master Lanting did not abandon me, and I have the intention to go north. When classmates met, there was always a lot to talk about, especially about the people and things that happened during their school days. As they talked, Jiang Pengji suddenly remembered that Lu Zheng still owed her a debt. Unknowingly, Fang Zhi accepted the task of collecting the debt on her behalf. When she asked for the reason, Fang Zhi replied, "Most people like perfection. Things remain the same, but people change." It's easy to say, but heart-wrenching to hear. Chapter 16:12. For this simple reason, Fang Zhi appeared in front of Lu Zheng. Zi Zai Chuan once said, "Time flies. Day and night." Fang Zhi took the initiative to lead the topic to his destination. He sighed and said, "It's a luxury to meet my classmates in the past. I met Lu Shi, the Duke of Lanting, a while ago. She's changed a lot." Lu Zheng snorted softly. How could she not change a lot? She was the only person in the entire Langyi Academy who had changed beyond recognition. Not only had she changed from a hedonistic aristocrat to a feudal lord, but she'd even changed her gender. Fang Zhi saw that Lu Zheng had no intention of talking, so he brought up the interesting events of his youth. However, he was the only one smiling awkwardly. Lu Zheng didn't even bat an eyelid. After a moment, Fang Zhi said, "Xiaoyin plans to follow and Shui to the end of her life?" Lu Zheng retorted, "How are you so sure that my lord is no match for Lu Shi?" Fang Zhi said, "Lu Shi and Shui. Whether Shui wins or loses, Xiaoyin, ask yourself, will you have a good ending?" Even though you've lived in the countryside for a long time and rarely heard about the affairs of the feudal lords, you heard a few things on the way here. Justin Duoxi's behavior is beneath Xiaoyin's notice, to say nothing of anything else. With your temperament, why would you wholeheartedly help a ruthless, and merciless tyrant? It's true that the four factions of Nanman have a deep grudge against Enshui, but Enshui's behavior isn't just for revenge. It's more like he's venting his cruelty. You have many conflicts with him. Now, there's Hua Yuan whom Enshui favors. Your situation. Lu Zheng raised a hand to signal for Fang Zhi to shut up. He really didn't want to hear this. You're here to persuade Lu Shi? Fang Zhi laughed bitterly. This lowly one is mediocre and clumsy. How am I qualified to be Lu Shi's persuader? Lu Zheng sneered. Clumsy? I didn't hear it, but you make sense. Why doesn't Xiaoyin consider it carefully? Fang Zhi said. You're looking at Enshui coldly. He's not a good lord. What conflict was the most difficult to reconcile between a subject and a lord? Of course, it was political stances and opinions. Lu Zheng was not a person without a mind of his own, and he was quite stubborn. Unless one side backed down, he and Enshui would have an irreconcilable conflict because of their political views, and LV Zheng's fate would not be good. Fang Zhi didn't want to see Lu Zheng die in Jiang Pengji's hands, but he also didn't want to see Lu Zheng killed by someone who wasn't a wise ruler. Lu Zheng shook his head. This matter couldn't be resolved with careful consideration. It was true that he didn't like Enshui, but he wouldn't join the other side just because of this reason. Lu Zheng's humble background had already been criticized by others. If he were to make such a capricious move, it was unknown how others would judge him. Most likely, they would use their bloodline as an excuse. For example, they would say that the son of a lowly person did not have the demeanor of a scholar, and that he was a slave to Langyi Academy. Fang Zhi sighed. I knew that you would reject me, but I didn't hold any hope. I only hoped that you would consider it carefully and not regret it. This was the advantage of knowing one's background. After Lu Zheng rejected him once, Fang Zhi would not insist on persuading him because it was unnecessary. Lu Zheng's confidence was firm. He would not change his stance just because of a few words. If he forced Lu Zheng to accept Fang Zhi's recommendation, it would be counterproductive. Lu Zheng accepted his kindness and nodded in agreement. I will consider it carefully. Little did he know that Fang Zhi had not given up. Instead, he chose to use a roundabout way to save the country. To be honest, Xiaoyin, an old friend, asked me to collect an old debt from you. Lu Zheng was stunned. He didn't know when he owed someone a debt and even provoked Fang Zhi to personally come to his door to collect it. What debt? Fang Zhi said, Xiaoyin, do you remember that you owe someone a promise? A gentleman keeps his word. You're also a person who keeps his word. You won't go back on your word. Lu Zheng thought for a while and knew who the debt collector was. He never made promises easily. Of course, what he owed Jiang Pengji was not a promise, but a gambling debt. After thinking about it, Fang Zhi was probably here to collect the debt on behalf of Jiang Pengji. Naturally, I won't go back on my word. Lu Zheng asked, what did the creditor ask you to tell me? Fang Zhi said, she asked you to accept your loss. Ha, women. Lu Zheng sneered in his heart. Byuku, ask her what she said at the time. She had said that her request would not be for the two of them to collude. She would kill someone and he would hand over a knife. If Lu Zheng really joined her side and helped her conquer the world, what was the difference between that and handing over a knife to someone? It would be helping a tyrant do evil. Not to mention, Lu Zheng was about to say something, but his expression suddenly froze. His eyes widened to the size of copper bells, and he suddenly shouted. Not good. Not good? Fang Zhi was scared out of his wits. He hurriedly asked, what's not good? Lu Zheng looked like he wanted to say something but hesitated. His bet with Jiang Pengji all those years ago had a premise. If Zixiao becomes mine in the future, you have to agree to one of my requests as long as it doesn't go against the principles of a gentleman. According to the context, become mine definitely did not mean that he was on Jiang Pengji's side. The two of them had to have an indescribable relationship for the bet to be fulfilled. In other words, the flower of Langyi Academy had already been bitten by a dog? Lu Lanting. I knew that a dog can't change its habits. Lu Zheng's face turned ashen, and he forcefully swallowed the last word. Zixiao was not sh*t, but Jiang Pengji was indeed a dog. As a lord of a region, she slept with her subordinate. How shameless could she be? Shameless. Even a rabbit would not eat the grass near its nest. Zixiao had worked for her for so many years, but in exchange, he had been slept with by his lord? Fang Zhi was confused. He did not understand, but he thought it was awesome. He had stayed at Lu Zheng's place for 2 days. He did not know who had leaked the news, but Hua Yuan had come personally. Fang Zhi frowned. Hua Yuan is not on good terms with you. He came to visit. Could it be? Lu Zheng said, don't overthink it. This person is very easy to deal with. If it was someone else, Fang Zhi would probably be detained. But if it was a lunatic like Hua Yuan, things might not be so certain. Although Lu Shi was a dog, he was still a righteous person. He would not lay his hands on a classmate without a solid reason, let alone a classmate who had a good relationship with him. Hua Yuan, the impostor, had come to visit. Rather than saying that he was testing Lu Zheng, it would be more accurate to say that he was here to see his classmate. What brings you here? Lu Zheng's hands were hidden in his sleeves. He looked at Hua Yuan with an unfriendly gaze. Hua Yuan laughed. I heard that Xiaoyin's residence has an important guest. Lu Zheng said, how interesting. Why don't you go and pamper that hot beauty of yours? Why do you care if I have an important guest? Hua Yuan said, Byuku and I are classmates. I heard that he came to your residence, so I came to take a look. Why are you so angry? Chapter 16-13. In Hua Yuan's eyes, Lu Zheng's actions were a blatant lie. He could not be deceived at all. However, just as Lu Zheng had guessed, Hua Yuan was there to see his old classmate. He had no ill intentions. Since Lu Zheng had stopped him, he would not make a fool of himself. He shamelessly stayed at Lu Zheng's residence for a few cups of tea. When he did not see his old classmate, Fang Zhi, he stood up and prepared to leave. At that moment, Lu Zheng suddenly asked a question. Do you know what Fang Zhi looks like now? The so-called Lu Shi was a character that Hua Yuan had imagined after his illness flared up. This character was based on Jiang Pengji's intelligence. No matter how detailed the words were, they were just words in black and white. Many things only had a general idea. For example, Hua Yuan remembered that Lu Shi and Fang Zhi were schoolmates and had a good relationship. However, he did not know what Fang Zhi looked like. No matter how similar the imaginary character was, it was ultimately fake and could not have the real person's memory. Hua Yuan could not possibly know Fang Zhi's real appearance. Of course, he did not realize that the servant, who had just served him tea, was actually Fang Zhi. When Lu Zheng asked this question, Hua Yuan subconsciously tried to recall Fang Zhi's appearance, but it was all blank. He only had a vague idea. Who was Fang Zhi? He was from Zhangzhou's Dongmen County. He had studied in Langyi when he was young. He and himself were schoolmates and had a good relationship. There was no other content except for a brief introduction. Hua Yuan's calm expression immediately turned cold. He looked at Lu Zheng with a murderous look. Of course, he knew what Lu Zheng wanted to say. Lu Zheng wanted to deny his existence and disturb his emotions. He would not let him have his way. I haven't seen my schoolmate for almost 10 years. It's been a long time, so I can't remember clearly. Lu Zheng knew when to stop. He cupped his hands and bid farewell to Hua Yuan. The latter snorted coldly and waved his sleeves before leaving. After the garden left, Fang Zhi changed into his own clothes and walked out from the back hall. He looked in the direction Hua Yuan had left with surprise. Xiaoyin, this is, Lu Zheng revealed some insider information. The person who just left is the Lord's most trusted subordinate. Fang Zhi said, that person just now was Hua Yuan. He looks talented and has an outstanding temperament. No wonder An Shui appreciated him. It sounded like a compliment, but it was actually a derogatory remark. It sounded like a compliment, but in reality, it was a sarcastic jab at Hua Yuan for relying on his looks to climb to the top. Lu Zheng sneered and said, there's something wrong with Hua Yuan's brain. He always thinks that he studied in Lengjia County. I don't know where I heard that you were coming, so I came over to take a look. I asked you to appear, but he didn't recognize you at all. He must be crazy. Fang Zhi didn't know what was going on, but he learned from Lu Zheng that Hua Yuan had gone mad. How could that be? Just now, I saw that his facial features were clear and upright. How is he insane? After all, Fang Zhi had pledged his allegiance to Jiang Pengji. Lu Zheng could not reveal the exact situation of his own camp. Under the premise of satisfying his desire to confide in others, he could disrupt Fang Zhi's judgment. Even if Fang Zhi went back to report to Jiang Pengji, Lu Zheng wouldn't be worried. He doesn't look crazy, but his words are incoherent. Lu Zheng mocked, misleading Fang Zhi's judgment. As expected, Fang Zhi misunderstood that Hua Yuan was pretending to be crazy. He couldn't help but worry about Lu Zheng's situation under An Shui. Hua Yuan is deeply trusted and relied on by An Shui. He can be considered to be in a high position now. Why can't he tolerate even you and make things difficult for you? Fang Zhi was very worried about Lu Zheng's situation. It was fine if his lord didn't trust him, but there was also a colleague who was eyeing him covetously. How could he live like this? He really didn't know why Lu Zheng was so insistent on going down this path until he died. Why don't you reconsider what happened earlier? Looking at it coldly, An Duoshi isn't a wise leader, and Hua Yuan can't figure it out either. How can he still be in the mood for internal strife in front of a great enemy? Although it was inevitable that there would be internal conflicts within the group, as long as one could distinguish between priorities, it wouldn't affect the overall situation. If one ignored official matters for personal grudges, such a force would be dissolved and annexed by the enemy sooner or later. Lu Zheng pursed his lips and chuckled. Everyone is selfish. Some people forget their personal interests for the sake of the public, but there are also people who neglect the public for the sake of personal interests. Without a doubt, Hua Yuan was the latter. Fang Zhi said rather worriedly, what if he uses our relationship as a ruse to slander you? What will you do? If Hua Yuan revealed Fang Zhi's existence to An Shui, not only would Fang Zhi be in danger, but Lu Zheng would also face the risk of being deeply suspected. Lu Zheng smiled. Just take care of yourself. My lord still needs manpower for the time being, so she won't do anything. Just as Fang Zhi said, in front of a great enemy, An Shui wouldn't do anything to Lu Zheng even if his brain had been kicked by a donkey. It wasn't that An Shui cherished old friendships, but that he still needed Lu Zheng's assistance in many administrative matters. Lu Zheng had helped An Shui develop the group from nothing to today's scale. He had put in a lot of effort and energy. How could a mistress like Hua Yuan, who had stepped in halfway, completely replace him? An Shui wanted to kick Lu Zheng out, but he had to first find a suitable successor. Fang Zhi saw that Lu Zheng was confident, so he wasn't worried anymore. He and Lu Zheng were classmates, after all. How could he bear to see him die a horrible death? Although he had nothing to do at home, Lu Zheng wasn't under house arrest. he could still secretly send Fang Zhi away safely. A few days later, Fang Zhi returned to Jiangpengji along the waterway to report everything. She was silent for a long time after listening. Fang Zhi couldn't help but put in a good word for Lu Zheng. Xiaoyin's temperament. Without waiting for Fang Zhi to finish, Jiangpengji said, "In any case, we were classmates. As long as he wants to live, I won't kill him. I didn't even do anything to Qingjing, let alone Lu Zheng. For the sake of the Buddha, Master Yuanjing is old. He only has 4 direct disciples. If I can protect them, I will protect them all. Of course, if Lu Zheng takes things too hard and insists on stepping on my bottom line, I can't keep him." Fang Zhi stopped talking. He knew that this was the biggest concession and promise Jiangpengji could give as a feudal lord. "If that's the case, I'll be so bold as to thank you on behalf of Xiaoyin." Jiangpengji smiled. "Buku has a lot of confidence in me." Fang Zhi said, "I'm not trying to flatter you, and I don't know much about the situation. On the surface, Shui has indeed lost." He didn't believe that Shui couldn't see that the old faction led by Lu Zheng and the forces led by Hua Yuan were at odds. As the lord, she didn't think about balancing and mediating, but allowed them to fight. Even if they succeeded, there would be many twists and turns, and they wouldn't be able to protect their foundation in the future. On the contrary, Fang Zhi felt that his old classmate was more reliable. The only shortcoming he had was probably the fact that he had children. Fang Zhi made this trip on behalf of Jiangpengji. Of course, it wasn't just to collect debts from Lu Zheng. He had another mission. According to Fang Zhi's description, a war between the two families would probably break out soon. Chapter 1614. Langjun, this is the boundary of Langya County. Look outside. Spring flowers are blooming. Although it was a chilly season, the terrain of Langya County was different from the outside world. Spring came earlier than usual. Takshu changed out of her heavy, cotton-padded jacket and into a bright, light yellow dress. The hem of this dress was extremely long. When Takshu walked and spun her body half around, the folds of the dress would spread out. She easily spun in a big circle and left an arc in the air. Jiangpengji looked at her blushing cheeks and said with a smile, "Spring is here. You're more delicate. I don't know what honey you ate. Why is it so sweet?" Takshu blushed. Jiangpengji blinked and said, "Don't you know best what honey I ate? I should ask you what kind of magic potion you've been feeding me all day. I look left and right. Why is our Takshu so beautiful? The spring scenery outside is not as beautiful as your eyebrows." The two of them sat in the carriage and chatted. The curtain was rolled up. Clear sunlight poured in and dyed the carriage golden. They did not deliberately lower their voices. Naturally, their voices were heard by the carriage closest to them. Master Yuanjing was playing chess in the carriage. Occasionally, he was distracted and heard Jiangpengji's words. He smiled and shook his head. Frivolous. Tang Yao frowned and muttered, "You're so young, but you have so many flowery words." Lu Shi's young Langjun was still a few days away from his 13th birthday, but he had a lot of flowery words to tease the maidservants. He was so frivolous and did not know how many girls he would harm in 2 years. Who knew how he would get mixed up in the inner circle? Master Yuanjing said helplessly, "Being able to speak well is also a skill. If Lu Shi's young Langjun can win the hearts of girls, he won't have to worry about marriage in the future." At that moment, Wei Ci had a question to ask his teacher. When he heard what Master Yuanjing said, his expression became strange. "Teacher, are you serious?" Some people did not like Jiangpengji, but of course, there were people who liked her. For example, Lu Zheng, who was shameless and squeezed into the same carriage as Wei Ci. This new classmate is quite interesting. He's not like the others who always act like gentlemen. He's very lively. LV Zheng commented on Jiang Pengji. Qing Jing, who was playing chess with LV Zheng in his spare time, lowered his eyes and said nothing. Han Yu, who was watching the game, said, Xiaofan, are you saying this because your senior and junior brothers are old-fashioned and boring? I've met Lu Lanting before. He's not as likable as he seems. Qing Jing didn't say anything, but he changed his previous steady and sure approach and killed Lu Zheng to express his dissatisfaction. Lu Zheng saw that he had lost the upper hand on the chessboard, so he simply lay on the ground and let Qing Jing beat him. He struggled passively. Although Han Yu and the others didn't have a high opinion of Jiang Pengji, LV Zheng still believed that seeing was believing. A person's heart could only be revealed after a long time. Besides, he was only 13 years old. It was the time for him to get out of his stupidity. It would be too difficult for Jiang Pengji to be mature and steady like a weak scholar. Of course, this was not enough to win LV Zheng's favor. What LV Zheng liked the most was Jiang Pengji's equal attitude towards others. Because of his family background, LV Zheng didn't have many friends in the academy. There were only a few whom he could confide in. When he heard that the flower festival was Jiang Pengji's birthday, LV Zheng specially gave her a gift. The gift wasn't expensive, but it was thoughtful. In return, Jiang Pengji invited him to drink with prostitutes. Drinking with prostitutes is not bad. Prostitutes' wine, prostitutes' wine. When LV Zheng came back to his senses, he was already in a brothel filled with the fragrance of rouge and cosmetics. Why are you here? Jiang Pengji said matter-of-factly, didn't I promise to invite you to Chongqing Lane for a drink at Jishan Hot Spring? But the crown prince of the Count of Zhenbei died so suddenly that I forgot about it. As the saying goes, a gentleman never goes back on his word. I can't easily break my promise. Chongqing Lane was a famous red-light district near Jishan Hot Spring in Shangjing. It was a gentle place for men and a gathering of all kinds of beauties. LV Zheng blushed and almost knelt before Jiang Pengji. Jishan Hot Spring is Jishan Hot Spring. This is Langjia County. What's the difference? LV Zheng wanted to cry but had no tears. If the teacher finds out that we're looking for prostitutes, we'll be finished. His teacher never used a ruler to punish his students. He liked to punish them by making them copy books in all kinds of postures and positions. If he said this, it would probably cause misunderstandings. For example, a while ago, someone broke the rules of the academy and was punished by the teacher to copy books. He had to squat down with bamboo slips weighing more than 10 kilograms on his head. Another time, he was punished to copy in the middle of the night when he was sleepy. He said that he wanted his words to absorb the essence of the sun and the moon. He really didn't know how these crafty and inexhaustible methods came up with them. Jiang Pengji rolled her eyes and said, "Who told you it's looking for prostitutes?" "I said it's drinking." "Do you want to stay in the arms of a prostitute?" LV Zheng was speechless. Jiang Pengji said, "I'll only be 13 years old after today. Are you willing to bury a virgin like me in a red-light district?" LV Zheng said. "Really just drinking?" Jiang Pengji said, "Of course. You don't want something else to happen, do you?" LV Zheng felt as if his secret had been exposed. He blushed a little. "Did I say that I want something to happen?" A gentleman is upright. Why would he think of such filthy content? Jiang Pengji curled her lips and said, "Forget it. Which gentleman doesn't leave a descendant? Unless old Wang lives next door." "What do you mean?" Jiang Pengji said, "In ancient times, there was an evil demon who liked to hook up with married women. He often settled next door to his target woman in order to be in a favorable position. He took advantage of the absence of the male owner to have private contact with the woman and secretly conceived a child. According to what you said, a gentleman should be ruthless and abandon his desires. He shouldn't think about relationships between men and women. If he didn't do such things, how would his descendants come about? Most likely old Wang next door worked hard for him. LV Zheng was dumbfounded. He reprimanded her with a red face. What kind of books are you reading at such a young age? You should read more about the sage's words. No, I like beautiful young ladies. LV Zheng's alcohol tolerance was not very good, but Jiang Pengji was not drunk. In the end, she carried the drunk LV Zheng on her shoulder and left. What are you doing in the middle of the night? Carrying him over the wall, Jiang Pengji found 3 sneaky shadows nesting in a remote corner. Their heads were close together and they were looking at something with a candle. Jiang Pengji called out, "Hey, what are you 3 doing?" "Sneaky." The 3 students who were caught panicked. Jiang Pengji threw LV Zheng aside and he lay on his back. She quickly snatched the thing that the 3 of them were trying to hide. She took a look, it was a super luxurious version of the fire avoidance drawing made of bamboo paper. There were movements, expressions, and a plot. One had to know that bamboo paper was extremely expensive at that time. Ordinary books were not even enough for it, let alone drawing a fire avoidance drawing. "You're a new student, right?" Without waiting for Jiang Pengji's response, one of the tall students stepped forward and put his hand on her shoulder, acting like they were very close. "Yes, I just arrived a few days ago." "Why, are you planning to bribe me?" "How can this be considered a bribe? This is called sharing blessings and suffering together. I'll lend it to you to broaden your horizons. Don't betray us." TSK, instead of looking at the fire avoidance drawing, it's better to look at the real person. You're still young, you don't understand the fun inside. Although the real person is good, there are flaws in the body. How can it compare to the perfection in the drawing? Jiang Pengji nodded seriously. Chapter 16-15. Hey, how can this be called twisted logic? This is called truth. Jiang Pengji laughed. I've never heard of such logic. As she spoke, she glanced at the friendly classmate. He was wearing brocade clothes, and she could tell that he was the foolish son of a rich family. He was the classic example of a foolish person with a lot of money. If not, who would be willing to spend a lot of money to draw fire-avoiding pictures on bamboo paper? Wasn't that just burning one's hands with too much money? If one had the money to buy paper figures, they might as well look for the real person. Which pretty girl in the red light district couldn't get one? The paper figures were fake, but the real person could still see, touch, and smell them. In the words of the audience, the person in front of her was probably an otaku who was addicted to 2D figurines. He would rather spend a lot of money on the paper figures than spend it on the real person. Jiang Pengji had a good eye. The person in front of her was just that. The friendly classmate said, "Haven't you heard of it now? You're still young. You'll know when you're older." Jiang Pengji was speechless. She might look like a 13-year-old, but she was in her 40s. Wasn't it ridiculous for a little kid to say that to her? Jiang Pengji sized up the other 2 with her peripheral vision. Unlike the silly duosu beside her, who was wearing brocade clothes, the other 2 were obviously ordinary or even poor students. This could be seen from their clothes, the way they dressed, the skin on their hands, the thick calluses on their palms, and the incense they used. She was surprised. Since she transmigrated to this world, she had seen a clear division between the rich and the common people. It was rare to see people of 2 classes get along well. The one with the best background was the silly duosu beside her. His surname was Jiang, his given name was Emo, and his courtesy name was Benji. The slightly inferior one was Mashio, and his courtesy name was Jiqing. The most ordinary one was Fangji, and his courtesy name was Byuku. After a deeper understanding, Jiang Pengji finally understood why the 3 of them could get along so well. Jiang Mo liked to collect all kinds of pictures of beauties and fire-avoiding pictures. He was willing to spend a lot of money for the pictures he liked. It was said that in order to correct his addiction to 2D, his parents did not hesitate to put 5 or 6 beauties in his room. They had slender waists, big breasts, and perky buttocks. However, Jiang Mo refused to look at them. He was obsessed with the paper figures every day, as if he was possessed. Ma Xiu's family had dozens of acres of fertile land, so he didn't have to worry about food and drink. Occasionally, he could even help Fangji, who lived in the same room as him. Fangji's family background was the worst, but he was good at painting. He was almost as good as Wei Ci, who was the best painter in the academy. Both of them had their own style. Fangji could accurately capture the characteristics of a person, and could draw them vividly with just a few strokes. In order to earn some extra money, he would occasionally accept some orders, such as the fire avoidance diagram. A few days ago, Jiang Mo spent a lot of money to buy the best bamboo paper and gave it to Fangji to draw the fire-repelling painting. Fangji had spent a lot of effort on this order, and it had just been completed not long ago. When Jiang Mo heard the news, he immediately woke up from his sleep and rushed over to inspect the goods. The academy didn't allow anything like the fire-repelling painting, not to mention that Fangji's drawing was very sexy. The three of them were sneakily handing over the stolen goods in a secluded area. Who knew that they would bump into Jiang Pengji, who was carrying the drunken Lu Zheng back? Look, you've seen it now. You can't just casually talk about this. Although Jiang Mo was born into a wealthy family, he was not very courageous. To put it bluntly, he was a bit of a coward. Jiang Pengji said, "So what if I did?" Fangji's face paled. Jiang Mo said, "If you say it, the three of us can testify against each other and drag you down with us. Just look at you and LV Xiaoyin's makeup and the smell of alcohol on you, it's obvious that you just came back from the red light district. If we can't escape, then don't even think about escaping." Because each of them had something on the other, they hid it from each other and actually used it to shorten the distance between them. Lu Zheng was completely muddle-headed and entered the camp of the bandits, but Jiang Pengji found Jiang Mo and the other two to be quite fun. Teenagers of this age all liked to brag. Jiang Mo, for example, claimed that he had been through hundreds of battles even though he hadn't even given his virginity to anyone. When they started to talk dirty, each of them blushed at Jiang Pengji's words. They had no actual combat experience and no theory, yet they still learned to brag. Old CG taught them what it meant to be a high level. "I know a drawing method that not only looks good, but it can also make people move." Jiang Mo asked curiously, "The drawing can move?" Fangji was also curious. Jiang Pengji explained the most basic drawing method, and the three of them smiled meaningfully. Lu Zheng, who had been dragged down with him, folded his arms coldly. Ma Xiu and the others loved to study, but Jiang Pengji and Jiang Mo preferred to skip class. When they heard that there was a girl with outstanding beauty, the two of them would always go over to take a look. "You don't like real people, why are you so enthusiastic?" Jiang Mo said, "People have flaws, but they also have strengths. If everyone's different strengths were combined, wouldn't they be perfect?" Jiang Pengji was speechless. To put it bluntly, it was for the sake of her paper dolls. If she collected too many materials, there would always be unexpected incidents, such as the little tyrant kidnapping a girl. Lu Zheng wanted to keep the peace, but Jiang Pengji couldn't bear to see the little tyrant be so arrogant, and she couldn't bear to see the beautiful girl fall into the evil hands. "What do you plan to do?" "That family is nothing, but this is Lengyue County, not Hejian County. The magistrate of Liuzhou is far away in Chongzhou. How can he protect you?" Lu Zheng and Jiang Pengji had known each other for a long time. He knew that she had a bad temper and it was a headache. Jiang Pengji said, "A man dressed up as a woman. Tonight, all of you wait for a good show." She changed into women's clothes and entered the little tyrant's manor. She tied the whole family to the beam of the house and whipped them. The 4 of them were stunned by her actions. Lu Zheng took out a handful of melon seeds from his sleeve. The 4 of them lined up and leaned against the low wall to watch Jiang Pengji's passionate performance. The corner of Ma Xiu's mouth twitched. "You actually brought this," Lu Zheng snorted. "Teacher gave it to me yesterday. It was newly cooked by the master's wife. If you don't like it, don't eat it. I want to save some." How could the 3 of them dislike it? They each grabbed a handful and started munching on the melon seeds. "Alright, you guys. My hand hurts from whipping, but you guys are enjoying the show." Jiang Mo laughed. "You can't say that. You used your hands, but we used our mouths. Everyone worked hard." Lu Zheng said, "I couldn't tell, but you look pretty in women's clothes." Without waiting for Jiang Pengji to refute, Jiang Mo said, "Is Lanting's appearance considered pretty? If I were to dress up as a woman, I would definitely be prettier than him. Lanting doesn't look like one at all. He should at least find a few steamed buns to pad his chest. Look at his pea-shaped body. I wonder how the little tyrant's eyes worked. He didn't notice anything unusual. The young lady he had his eyes on has all the qualities she should have." Jiang Pengji was speechless. Ma Xiu laughed. "If Lanting is a woman, then her husband is most likely interested in men." Fang Zhi also said, "Not necessarily. Maybe she's a woman who likes to polish her mirror." Jiang Pengji laughed coldly. Chapter 16:16. Jiang Pengji was prepared to attack Nansheng, and the first to bear the brunt was Yang Tao's former territory. The ones who were most worried weren't An Shui and the others, but the aristocrats who had betrayed Yang Tao. They were burning with anxiety. How could they not be anxious? The group of aristocrats had been bewitched and recruited by An Shui. To be precise, they had been attracted by the pie that Lu Zheng had drawn. They were blinded by greed and dizziness. They gritted their teeth and abandoned Yang Tao, who had lost his power. Not only had they led their troops to rebel against Yang Tao, but they had also forced Yang Tao to the brink of death several times. They had been so resolute not only to eliminate Yang Tao, but also to show their loyalty to the new master by stepping on their old master. They had thought that An Shui would fulfill his promise after doing so well. They hadn't expected him to burn the bridge after crossing it. Only 10 to 20% of the benefits that had been agreed upon had been fulfilled. The rest had been delayed until there was no sign of them. No one dared to urge them. An Shui even pretended to be deaf and dumb. It was obvious that he was going to renege on his debt. To put it bluntly, this kind of unspoken behavior was akin to ignoring others. He wasn't willing to cut his own flesh, but he ran faster than anyone else when asked to reap the benefits. They had just gotten rid of Yang Tao, and An Shui had sent people to take over the benefits and take over Yang Tao's territory. After taking control of the territory, An Shui didn't send people to govern or pacify the people. He didn't open the granaries to release grain or anything like that. Instead, he gathered troops, recruited the young, and lobbied the wealthy. It was understandable if the former two were fighting to the death with Jiang Pengji to increase their own strength, but the latter's actions were thought-provoking. The astute aristocrats could see through it at a glance. Wasn't this taking advantage of the situation? An Shui had sent people to lobby for them. He'd painted a nice and fragrant cake. The wealthy would provide money and grain to help him get listed. Would they buy it or not? If they bought it, they didn't know when they could recoup their losses. An Shui only needed to move his lips, but they would have to pay with real money and grain. What if An Shui reneged on his debt? If they didn't buy it, the owner of the land under their feet would change from Yang Tao to An Shui. Did they have the right to say no? Even though the aristocrats had connections and status, the private troops they raised couldn't compare to those of the feudal lords. An Shui wanted to act like a hoodlum, using all sorts of ways to exploit and squeeze out their family assets and private stashes. They were forced into a passive position. Seeing through Anne's tricks, the group of hot-headed speculators finally calmed down. And Wuxi's words may sound nice, but in reality, he doesn't do what he says. Yang Zhengzi, on the other hand, and Shui was in a crisis of trust, and the empty promises he had promised were unable to attract large amounts of investment for him. The rich families that had been fooled had also learned their lesson. At this moment, An Shui revealed his true colors as well. He switched from negotiating to using both the carrot and the stick to threaten them, causing them to suffer in silence. Every time this happened, they would remember how good Yang Tao was. Even though Yang Tao was from Dongqing and relied more on the team he brought out from Dongqing, Yang Zhengzi was also a man of steel. He was a man of his word, and there was nothing wrong with that. The Nanqing aristocrats who had supported Yang Tao in the beginning had also earned quite a bit of dividends. Even though Yang Tao had lost to Jiang Pengji in the end, it was still better than An Shui squeezing them dry right from the start. How regretful. The leaders of a few aristocratic families gathered together for a discussion. Their words were extremely dissatisfied with An Shui. In contrast to An Shui, the former lord, Yang Tao, had become a cinnabar mole in the white moonlight. I originally thought that An Shui's power was strong and that he had unified more than half of Nanqing. He should be able to fight Lu Shi. Now it seems that he's only strong on the outside but weak on the inside. A clan leader dressed in an indigo Confucian robe said in a low voice, Lu Shi led his troops south and acted as if he was invading Nanqing's land. We sent 12 urgent letters to An Shui asking for help, but he was indifferent. Sigh, we really misjudged him. Fighting a war was an activity that burned money and manpower. In the past 2 months, An Shui had vigorously recruited troops and horses, almost pulling away all the young and strong men in the vicinity. Now, there were only old, weak, and disabled soldiers left in the city. Every family could gather more than 10,000 elites, but it was not a long-term solution. Jiang Pengji was a vassal who had unified Dongqing. The 10,000 elites were not even enough to fill the gaps between her teeth. It was too late to spend money to recruit troops and horses to defend the city. The young and strong men in the vicinity were like chives. They had long been harvested by that greedy fellow, An Shui, over and over again. They were all bald. Without the young and strong men as the main force, how could they defend against Jiang Pengji's wolf-like army? It would be fine if it was just Jiang Pengji, but Jiang Pengji did not hold grudges against Yang Tao and allowed him to assist in training the troops. With Yan Lin's assistance, the two of them had a tacit understanding of each other. Back then, they could lead thousands of people to establish a large foundation in Nanqing. Now, they could lead Jiang Pengji to annex this place. Jiang Pengji was not familiar with the territory of Nanqing, but Yan Lin and his old officials were very familiar with each other. In less than 3 or 4 days, the border was in a state of emergency. Jiang Pengji's navy was divided into several groups and headed south at the same time. Their momentum was unstoppable. Why are you regretting this now? We didn't gather here to reflect on Yang Tao's actions. No matter how much they regretted it, it was water that had been poured out. They should think about the current situation and how to overcome the difficulties before them. Everyone kept silent and looked at each other, staring at each other with their eyes wide open. It seemed like no one was willing to be the first to stand out. Since you all have your reservations and refuse to speak, then I'll show my incompetence and throw a brick to attract jade. It was not a good thing for the atmosphere to be stiff, so someone could not sit still. He said, in my humble opinion, there are only 3 options before us now. Which 3? Everyone hurriedly asked. The first option is to prepare rations and gather troops to fight Lu Shi to the death. Isn't this like throwing an egg against a rock? Someone sighed gloomily. There was no difference between saying it and not saying it. The second option is to treat Shui the way we treated Yang Tao. Everyone looked at each other after hearing this. This suggestion was too rash. Jiang Pengji would not be moved if they stabbed Yang Tao first and Shui the next. If Jiang Pengji encountered a strong enemy, would they defect to their new master and stab her in the back? If they defected to Jiang Pengji, they would be lucky not to die, let alone taste the sweetness of dividends. This won't do. If we do this, how will the world view us? Forgive me for being unable to agree to such an immoral act. One by one, the other clan leaders agreed with this argument. They were the role models of the aristocratic families. How could they do evil things that were fickle for their own interests? Isn't there one more option? What's the last option? The man said, the last option. Why don't we stake it all on one throw and do our best to help Shui succeed? Everyone's faces turned green in an instant. It was as if they had swallowed several mosquitoes that had flown out of the latrine. Shui's behavior disgusted them. If they were to empty their pockets to help Shui, regardless of whether Shui won or lost, they would lose anyway. Chapter 16-17. Let's discuss. If I support Shui, I'd rather give all the grain in the granary to the refugees outside the city. At least the refugees could say a word of thanks. Even if they were fed to the beasts would know how to guard their homes. What did he get for giving him An? That Shui is a scoundrel. A scoundrel, a stubborn, crafty, and evil person. From this, it could be seen that Shui had infuriated this group of people. Otherwise, they would not have given him such a low evaluation. Everyone was silent, but their expressions showed that they agreed with the old chief's evaluation. Shui was truly a good-for-nothing. For the next few days, the battle situation became more and more tense, and the aura of war once again enveloped this quiet water town that was showing signs of decline. Everyone paid close attention to where Jiang Pengji's army was fighting. They heard that the other party was unstoppable and that the navy under her command had the help of Yang Tao and the others. They made full use of the terrain to appear and disappear unpredictably and advance at high speed. The few of them had mixed feelings. What was wrong with Yang Tao? Did he still defeat the vassal? Don't you have the low-key and dispirited look of a defeated vassal? Was it normal for the front lines to be so active? Jiang Pengji did not care about him. Was she not afraid that he would use his personal charm to secretly take over the military power? They realized that Yang Tao was really a magical man, and Jiang Pengji was even more of a magical woman. Seeing that the two of them were working together without any ill feelings, someone said sarcastically. TSK, Yang Zhengze wasn't forced to turn his power to Nanxing back then. He was obviously a spy sent by Lu Shi, wasn't he? They had every reason to believe that Yang Tao had come to Nanxing to scout for Jiang Pengji and act as the vanguard. Just look at how the two of them were cooperating so well. Where was the previous tit-for-tat attitude? Yang Tao and the others were familiar with the situation in Nanxing. This information was exactly what Jiang Pengji needed urgently. Just as everyone was hoping that Jiang Pengji's troops and horses would not be able to adapt to the difference in the weather between the north and the south, and that an epidemic would happen, they realized expressionlessly that the enemy was almost at their doorstep. This group of people felt deeply aggrieved. Most of the soldiers under Jiang Pengji's command were northerners. Even if they were trained, their swimming skills could not be compared to the soldiers of Nanxing. Dongqing's climate was dry, while Nanxing's was hot and humid with lots of rain. With such a huge difference in climate, they should not have been acclimatized. In the end, it was another slap in the face. Jiang Pengji's smooth sailing made them doubt the accuracy of the history books. The talk about acclimatization and the frequent outbreaks of diseases were all fake? Little did they know that the so-called acclimatization and diseases, other than physical differences, were more related to poor military hygiene and inadequate medical standards. As a general in the interstellar era, how could Jiang Pengji not know this? She had been in the army for so many years, and no matter how many soldiers she had never slacked on the discipline and hygiene of the barracks. Strict adherence to military discipline was the most important quality of elites, and camp hygiene was the foundation of the logistics of the three armies. After nearly 10 years of strict discipline, the soldiers in the tent had gotten used to it. As long as the conditions allowed, they would pay attention. If the conditions of war weren't good, and they couldn't even care about their lives, no one would be so picky about hygiene. No matter how they complained, it was an indisputable fact that the enemy was about to arrive. Similarly, there wasn't much time left for them to hesitate. Initially, there were a few people who wanted to throw away their pride and extend an olive branch to Jiang Pengji. Once they heard that the vanguard was Yang Tao, they immediately retreated. If they really surrendered, they would probably be killed by Yang Tao before they could even see the person in question. After the deed was done, Yang Tao would frame them, tarnish their reputation, and give all their family assets to Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji would turn a blind eye to Yang Tao's actions. If they died, they would have died in vain. It was quite sad to think about it this way. They couldn't surrender. That would be courting death. They also couldn't bet on an shui. That would be like throwing a meat bun at a dog. There was no return. After thinking about it, it was better for them to move away with their families. They couldn't afford to offend them, but they could hide from them. The world was so big. They didn't believe that Jiang Pengji could lead Yang Tao to conquer every inch of land. Dreams were plentiful, but reality was harsh. When they dragged their families to pack up their belongings and secretly moved, they were intercepted by unfamiliar troops. The head of the family looked at Qian Su, who was leading them, with a pale face. It was as if his face had been painted white. Qian Su smiled and cupped his hands. He greeted them in a graceful manner. "We haven't seen each other for a few months. How have you been?" Qian Su brought more than 1,000 troops to intercept them. Most of them were cavalrymen. On the other hand, the moving troops had many carriages and horses, but most of them were old, weak, women, and children. There were only 500 guards. It was obviously unrealistic to protect the old, weak, women, and children while fending off the enemy's weapons. How have you been?" Qian Su pulled the reins. The 1,000 troops he brought surrounded the other party. He trembled. He finally vented his anger from being tricked. Even though he relied on Jiang Pengji's power to vent his anger, it wasn't important. His old master, Yang Tao, didn't mind. He forgot himself on the battlefield and charged straight into the territory he used to govern. Qian Su didn't mind at all. "Where are you going?" Qian Su asked in a gentle voice. The head of the family watched as the guards around him were taken down before they could even fight for a few rounds. His face suddenly turned ashen. He squeezed out 2 words from the root of his teeth. "Scout. Kiss." Qian Su smiled. "It's a chaotic time. It's a long journey to visit your family. You've brought along your family and so much property. What will you do if you encounter bandits? If it's light, you'll lose money. If it's heavy, you'll lose both your family and your property. Considering our old friendship, why don't you let us escort you?" The head of the family was so angry that he almost fell to the ground. "Bandits? Isn't Qian Su in front of me a standard bandit? How dare he call a thief to stop a thief?" Qian Su suddenly stopped smiling. He raised his hand and waved his sleeves. He said coldly, "What are you all standing there for?" As soon as he finished speaking, the soldiers raised their swords. Screams and screams were heard one after another. All the guards were executed. The head of the family looked at the guards and servants in his residence being killed with a pale face. A chill ran from his back to the back of his head. "What do you want to do?" Qian Su said, naturally, I want to send you back to your residences. Most of the people in the wilderness are women and children. It's too dangerous without guards. You're going too far. People without guards? Weren't they all killed by Qian Su's order? He was held down by 2 soldiers by the shoulders like a prisoner, which made him feel ashamed and humiliated. The sword at Qian Su's waist was pressed against his neck. With just a little more force, his head would fall to the ground. He didn't dare to move. Going too far? Qian Su's thin lips curled into a cold smile. He said mockingly, the winner is king and the loser is the bandit. If you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose. Whatever you did back then, I'll pay you back. You relied on Shui's power. Why can't I rely on Lu Shi's power? A loss is a loss. Don't say such pompous words. If you have the energy to bark like a dog, why don't you think about how to deal with the aftermath of your family? You dare? Qian Su laughed coldly in his ear. Why not? Chapter 16-18. No one expected Yang Tao to come so fast. No one had time to react. A few of them had already packed their belongings and ran out of the city with their families. Unfortunately, they were intercepted by Qian Su and the others. The remaining few families moved slower. When hundreds of soldiers barged into their houses, their mansions were still in a mess. Some had already packed up, while others were still piled up. The servants were busy, and the women in the backyard were unaffected by the outside world. They were as stable as Mount Tai. According to Yan Lin's order, if anyone dared to resist, they would be killed, regardless of their gender. At first, some of the servants pulled out their swords, but after a few of them fell, the rest didn't dare to make a move. The master of the house stood in the hall with a pale face. A few important women were also trapped there. The soldiers didn't touch anyone. Occasionally, some of them would sneak something into their sleeves or arms. Jiang Pengji had always been strict with her soldiers. She didn't encourage such behavior, but she didn't forbid it either. The soldiers were too uneducated. She could only ask them not to make mistakes of principle, disturb the people, and be lenient in other aspects. When Yang Tao barged into the manor while wearing a suit of armor, the face of the landowning household leader darkened. His beard trembled so hard that it looked like it was electrifying. How dare you? The leader of the Shi family was over 50 years old. He had many children and grandchildren. There were 25 guards in the hall. The older ones, such as the leader of the Shi family, were in their 40s. The youngest one was only 3 months old. He was still crying in his mother's arms. Children's cries were the most heart-wrenching, but also the most annoying. At that moment, the leader of the Shi family was no longer in the mood to play with his grandson. He didn't like his grandson because he looked like himself. Instead, he felt annoyed and disgusted. His grandson's biological mother, his daughter-in-law, saw the fierce and impatient look in her father-in-law's eyes. She was so scared that she lowered her head. She secretly sobbed while gently coaxing her little son, who couldn't stop crying. The hall was even more chaotic. Everyone's here. Yang Tao put his hand on the weapon at his waist and smiled at the leader of the Shi family. Who gave you permission to break into their house? The old chief's gray beard trembled slightly as he scolded. Yang Tao didn't answer. Instead, Yan Lin, who was behind him, sneered. Of course, it's allowed by strength in numbers. The old patriarch was infuriated, and his wife hurriedly supported him to steady him. How arrogant! Yan Lin said, every dog has its day. Back then, you were heartless and betrayed us. Why didn't you foresee what would happen today? Don't think that the entire world is on your side just because you have a few words to say. Old man, you reap what you sow. How could Shui convince these people to give up on Yang Tao? Apart from Lu Zheng's eloquence and ability to pinpoint their weaknesses and worries, their greed and hypocrisy were also a major reason. Investment is risky, so one must be cautious when entering the industry. There was no such thing as a sure-win investment in this world. These landowning households planned to stand firm in this chaotic world and even take advantage of this chaotic world to advance further. Naturally, they had to bear the corresponding risks. Yan Lin didn't blame them for withdrawing their investment when things went south. But it was too much to turn around and step on them. The cause sown that day will bear fruit today. You call others arrogant, but why don't you look at yourself in the mirror? Even though Yang Tao didn't take it to heart, Yan Lin couldn't let it go. These people held Yan Shuxian, Yang Rujia, and the 2 children hostage to threaten Yang Tao. They almost killed Yang Tao. He couldn't forget it even if he wanted to. Even the others could tell that Yan Lin didn't come with good intentions, let alone the old patriarch who was used to deceiving others. He was panting with rage, and his wrinkled cheeks were turning purple. You're just a bunch of dogs who rely on their master's power. So what if you kill us today? At the end of the day, you're still Lu Shi's lackeys. You're just stray dogs. The old patriarch knew very well that Yan Lin wouldn't kill them, but he wouldn't let them go easily either. If he robbed them of their wealth and blamed the refugees and bandits for it, they wouldn't be able to avenge themselves. Without the wealth they had accumulated over the years, how could they make a comeback in the future? There were so many main and side branches that they had become a burden. If they were robbed of all their wealth, they would only be left with a bunch of people waiting to be eaten. They wouldn't even need the outside world to kick them when they were down. Yan Lin sneered. Yang Tao said seriously, Xiaoyang, why are you wasting so much time talking to them? Yan Lin calmed down and asked, in Zheng's opinion, how should we deal with these people? Yang Tao asked casually, they're just a bunch of prisoners. If we don't arrest them, are we supposed to worship them like Buddha? The old patriarch and the others were livid. Blue veins popped on their foreheads. Only Yan Lin was smiling. Zhengza is right. There's no need to waste our time talking to these people. Just arrest them. After saying that, the old patriarch saw pairs of soldiers working together to carry boxes after boxes of items out. The old patriarch's eyes were about to pop out of his head. These boxes were gold and silver, financial records, account books, land deeds, and incomplete books. There were at least 200 boxes in total. Bandits. Shameless. Don't go too far. The old patriarch's eyes rolled back and he fainted. His children and daughters-in-law were so frightened that they surrounded him. Yang Tao snorted and waved his hand. Keep an eye on these people, lest they collude with the enemy. Let's go to the next house. Jiang Pengji wanted to rob the rich, but she couldn't just do it by force. She had to find a reason. Yang Tao asked Yan Lin worriedly as he was leaving. Lu Lanting is really doing this. Is she planning to rob along the way? Yang Tao thought that Jiang Pengji was too bold. She had offended the entire Nansheng aristocratic circle. Yan Lin's eyes were emotionless. He said coldly, so what? Lu Shi was born in Dongqing, not Nansheng. Most of the aristocratic families in Nansheng were under An Shui's protection. They didn't have any good intentions towards her. If Lu Shi didn't treat them as enemies, was she going to worship them as her ancestors? The winner takes all. She didn't kill them all and only took some of their belongings. Wasn't that merciful? Besides, she has been fighting for 2 years. She has enough soldiers, but she is running low on food. If she doesn't find a way to replenish her food, what will she do when she runs out of food? Turn corpses into human meat to satisfy her hunger? She has no choice. Yang Tao was shocked. Lack of food. Yan Lin said, I heard that after Lu Shi started his rebellion, he has been plowing the fields year after year. The fertility of the fields is getting worse and worse. Now he is at the end of his rope. She's been fighting for another 2 years, and that's enough food for 400,000 soldiers. That's not a small sum. Chapter 16-19. Yan Lin saw it clearly. His guess was right. However, he did not know that Jiang Pengji had found a way to increase the fertility of the land 2 years ago, and that Do Shi, who came from a farming family, was in charge of improving the fertility of the land. The increase in production last year was not high, but it stopped the downward trend. Looking at the situation, the output should recover a little this year. As long as they could continue farming, not only would the people in the rear not lack food, but the pressure on the front lines would also be greatly reduced. Even so, the financial expenditure was still in deficit. Jiang Pengji had been using the private treasury to subsidize the expenditure, which was barely enough to maintain the balance. In order to not collapse in the future, it was necessary to beat up the local tycoons and plunder their wealth. Not only that, Jiang Pengji imitated the predecessors of the previous dynasty and did something even more outrageous. She sent the gold raiding officers to plunder the funerary goods from the ancestral graves. Of course, these things were done in secret. The tomb robbers disguised themselves as ordinary tomb robbers and tried their best not to touch the funerary objects in the coffins. Jiang Pengji had a very good reputation among the common people. She pretended to be innocent in front of the common people. One moment, she said that the robbers' holes were left behind by the barbarians from the 4 tribes of Nanman. Another moment, she said that the robbers' holes were committed by roaming bandits. The Nanxing aristocrats who had their ancestral graves plundered could only vomit blood. She really dares to do it. Yang Tao was speechless. Digging up someone's ancestral grave was such a shameless thing, and the key point was that he could even clear his name. This operation was too terrifying. The people of this generation were too easy to fool. They always felt that manipulating public opinion was like playing a game. A duke who had ordered to plunder the dead and embezzle the living could actually wash himself clean like a white lotus. The world was getting more and more magical. Speaking of which, Yan Lin said, I think Wei Zixiao is scarier. Why? Yang Tao didn't understand. Wei Zixiao is the only gentleman I've ever seen who can stand shoulder to shoulder with Xiao Yang. How is he scary? Yang Tao wished he could use all the words he knew to describe Yan Lin and Wei Ci. Yan Lin sighed. He couldn't bear to tell his best friend the truth. Yang Tao did not know that Wei Ci had single-handedly manipulated the people's opinions of inverting right from wrong and secretly inciting the people to hate the rich and the aristocratic families. Because Jiang Pengji never disturbed the people when she fought a war, she basically built wherever she fought. Her reputation among the people had always been good. On the contrary, most of Nanxing's aristocratic families did not do anything, and the commoners had long been resentful of them. Part of the reason for the calamity of the southern barbarians was due to the aristocratic family's manipulation of power. On one side was Jiang Pengji, who had brought them stability and protection. On the other side was the Nanxing aristocrats who had previously oppressed and exploited them. The latter had a negative and strong image in the eyes of the people, but now they jumped out to complain that their ancestral graves had been stolen by the shameless Jiang Pengji. Who would the people believe more? He didn't need to investigate to know he would choose Jiang Pengji. Just as the navy that Wei Ci had secretly released had said, the Duke of Lanting had been fighting for more than 10 years and had experienced countless battles. For many years, she did not even disturb the common people once. She did not even touch the common people's fertile fields and family wealth. Why would she do something so immoral as digging up the ancestral graves of others? That's impossible. Even people with poor logic would be fooled by the seemingly reasonable excuse, not to mention the common people who were 99% illiterate. Anyway, you should stay away from Yan Lin swallowed his words and corrected himself. Men and women should stay away from each other. One of them killed, while the other passed the knife to the victim and was responsible for cleaning up the crime scene and framing the victim. He couldn't afford to offend them. Not only was Jiang Pengji powerful, but she also had the upper hand in public opinion. This loss, those unlucky Nanjing aristocrats had no choice but to eat it. Yang Tao spent half a month conquering half of the province. The situation in the other provinces was also very gratifying. News of victory came one after another. Jiang Pengji ate a few more bowls of rice because of this. The reason why the war was going so smoothly was because of the enemy's passive resistance. When the people heard that Shui had plundered the young men of the two provinces at the border of Nanjing, some people were confused. Isn't Wuxia planning to give up? Tisk, if he really gave up, why would he fight the war? Wouldn't it be more straightforward to surrender with his troops? He most likely has some conspiracy and plans to wait for the enemy to exhaust himself. Some people were confused, while others saw clearly and had their own thoughts. Nanjing has been in chaos for almost 10 years. There is a shortage of young men, and the people are extremely poor. Rather than disperse the troops to defend the provinces, it's better to concentrate the troops to defend the most fertile, easily defensible, and difficult to attack areas. Our army is on an expedition, so supplies are difficult, but Shui doesn't have to worry about that. Jiang Pengji had come thousands of miles to attack Shui's doorstep, and he had to bring his own food when he went out. Shui was sitting at his doorstep defending, and when he was hungry, he went to the kitchen to take a bite of a pancake. It went without saying who had the advantage in logistics. Everyone suspected that Shui wanted to fight a war of attrition with Jiang Pengji. Whoever could not hold on first would leave. Jiang Pengji naturally knew what an ordinary person could think of. However, she felt that things were not that simple. Jiang Pengji did not know much about Shui, but she knew that he was not someone who would easily admit defeat. How could he retreat without a fight? Unless he has other plans. Jiang Pengji rubbed her hands a few times. Her slender fingertips glowed red. It was already midwinter. Nanjing's winter was colder than Dongqing's. Dongqing's coldness was physical damage. No matter how cold it was still on the skin. Nanjing's coldness was magical damage. It was wet and cold, seeping into the bones. This was Jiang Pengji's first winter in Nanjing. Even she felt a little uncomfortable, not to mention the other generals and the ordinary soldiers who had weaker physiques. The first winter snow came very suddenly. Jiang Pengji had no choice but to stop fighting. With this winter snow, Jiang Pengji also understood Shui's true intentions. I've seen shameless people, but I've never seen anyone more shameless than Shui. Shui plundered the young, strong, and rations clean. The old, the weak, the sick, and the disabled all lacked winter clothes and food. If they were left unattended, many people would die in this winter. Jiang Pengji could not help but suspect that Shui wanted to use this method to speed up the depletion of Jiang Pengji's rations. Shui could bear the infamy and disregard the lives of the people, but Jiang Pengji, who had a good reputation among the people, could not. Due to many reasons, Jiang Pengji had no choice but to temporarily stop fighting in the south. She had to wait for spring to come and fight again. Of course, due to her doubts about Shui's character, it was hard to guarantee that he would not launch a sneak attack. She still had to be cautious. Fortunately, I'm prepared. A winter without a hot pot was not perfect. A hot pot without chili was soulless. In this era, chili only grew in the wilderness. A small amount of it flowed into the central plains and was used as a spice. Yan Lin was also born in a gentry family. He had mixed incense before, so he naturally knew what was good and what was bad. He did not understand why Jiang Pengji had sent people to deliver more than 20 jars of dried chili. Yan Lin speculated, although this thing can drive away the cold, it has a strong and pungent smell. The soldiers might not be used to it. Yang Tao opened the secret report sent by Jiang Pengji. He had a strange expression on his face. Lu Lanting said, "This thing is to be boiled in water before drinking." Not only that, but she also gave each general a set of warming cauldrons. Chapter 1620. Yan Lin politely declined the offer of dried chili and chili powder soup. Although most of the ingredients were edible, the chili powder was too strong. Yan Lin, who lived a delicate life, rejected it. "How dare you eat Lu Shi's food?" Seeing Yang Tao's eagerness, Yan Lin felt a little tired. "Why not? Are you afraid that Lu Lanting will harm me? You've used so much chili powder to send the entire army to hell just to harm me? Xiao Yang thinks too highly of me." Yang Tao looked innocent, but he knew that there were some things that did not need to be said out loud. "I heard that Lanting likes to warm cauldrons too. It's probably her hobby. It's not a big deal to have a few meals." Yang Tao held a small jar of finely ground chili powder in one hand. He dipped his finger into it and licked it. An indescribably spicy taste filled his tongue, and he began to salivate. Although it was his first time tasting chili powder, it was not bad. Yang Tao dipped his finger into it again. He smacked his lips. He had fallen in love with chili powder the first time he tasted it, and the second time he tasted it, he fell in love with it. Seeing Yang Tao's unhygienic behavior, Yan Lin could not help but say, "Don't cook that jar in the pot." Yang Tao asked Yan Lin in surprise as he sipped the chili powder, savoring the spicy taste in his mouth. "Why?" Yan Lin glanced at his finger and frowned in disgust. "It's dirty." He did not want to eat Yang Tao's saliva. The thought of it disgusted him. Not only did Yan Lin have obsessive-compulsive disorder, but he was also a clean freak. It was just that he rarely showed it during battles. Yang Tao understood. He smiled and said, "It's okay. Lu Lanting gave me enough. I'll get you a new jar." Yan Lin was speechless. He did not say that he wanted to eat it. Jiang Pengji explained in detail how to make different kinds of spicy broth and the importance of chili powder in barbecuing. Yang Tao was right. Yang Tao, who was not a fan of warming cauldrons, suddenly fell in love with this way of eating. Nanxing was humid and cold, but after eating the spicy cauldron, he did not feel cold. Instead, he felt sweaty. In this season, the taste of spicy hot tripod was really great, especially for someone like Yang Tao who had a strong taste. Eating spicy food was like finding his true love, and he wanted to eat hot tripod every meal. In the end, his stomach couldn't take it, and he frequently went to the toilet. "How old are you? You still can't control your mouth." Yan Lin was speechless when he saw the red pimples on Yang Tao's face. It looked like he had eaten too much spicy food, which had caused internal heat to build up in his body. He didn't have time to vent it. It wasn't serious, but Yang Tao's childishness still left him speechless. Yang Tao was. Yang Yan looked pale. Was. Yang Tao was Yan was. Sigh, people only live for a few decades. If they can't do whatever they want, what's the point of living? Yang Tao now ate chili peppers as a side ingredient for every meal. He couldn't live without spicy food. He always felt that the previous gap of 20 to 30 years had been filled. Cutting off the chili and continuing to eat bland dishes was simply asking for his life. Yan Lin couldn't help but sneer. He asked the kitchen to prepare some light porridge and pickled bitter gourd for Yang Tao. No matter how Yang Tao begged for mercy, Yan Lin was not moved. He had been too lenient with Yang Tao in the past. Now, it was time for him to suffer a little and wake up. "I really don't know how Lu Shi discovered the use of this thing," Xian Su did not eat spicy food every day like Yang Tao, but he would eat spicy food every other day. It was addictive. It tasted good. What was more, if he ate it with some hot soup, he would feel as if he had just taken a hot bath. Xian Su felt that it was an indispensable seasoning in winter as it could be used in cold and damp places. Of course, he was most curious about how Jiang Pengji found out about chili. Chili was mostly grown in barbarian areas. Only a small amount of chili would enter the Central Plains and be used as raw materials for cooking. Xian Su could not imagine how Jiang Pengji had added spices to food. Yan Lin said, "Maybe she's imitating Shenong." Xian Su burst out laughing. Shenong tasted herbs to benefit the people. Why did Lu Shi taste spices? Could it be to benefit the foodies? Xian Su felt like he had discovered an incredible truth. Lu Shi, the Duke of Lanting who was rumored to have killed countless people, was actually a person who valued good food? Xian Su was amused by his own imagination. Chili was popular in the military camp that winter and attracted countless fans. It was also popular among the common people. Under normal circumstances, it would be difficult for the people to accept new things. But it was a time of war, so the spread of chili was smooth. Apart from chili, Jiang Pengji distributed some warm clothes to the people. In addition to the common wool fabrics, there were also cotton-padded clothes filled with cotton mixed with tree scraps. It was not that Jiang Pengji did not want to use cotton clothes, but the production of cotton was not high. There was a lot of wood scraps left in the papermaking industry in Chongzhou. In order to get warm clothes, she had to use this method. Even so, the warm clothes were better than the ones she had before. The clever women had started making clothes last year. It took them a whole year to get enough for the soldiers at the front line. Of course, not all warm clothes were the same. The cotton for Jiang Pengji and her group was the softest and warmest cotton. The thickness and workmanship were guaranteed. The cotton for the soldiers was of a lower thickness. They had clothes from previous years, so they did not feel cold. The cotton for the people was thinner than the soldiers, but it was still warm. It was to make more clothes for the people with a fixed amount of raw materials. With such a huge demand, they had to reduce the amount of raw materials. Apart from clothes, every city had more than 10 porridge stalls that distributed hot porridge. The porridge was not so thick that it could not be poured over, but it was enough to make one half full and not starve to death. This was the best that Jiang Pengji could take care of the people around her while ensuring the supply of food for the soldiers. Did she not have the ability to feed the people well? Of course not. She was still in contact with the old chief. She did not know where he had gone recently. It was not a problem to provide a large amount of food. Taking a step back, without the old chief, there was still the shop in the system. Without the system, the price of white rice in the shop was so low that it could be supplied to the whole army in bulk. But this was the last resort. Jiang Pengji would not touch it unless it was the last resort. Unless there was another natural disaster like the earthquake in Shangjing and Dongqing that could not be resisted by humans. Jiang Pengji did not want to give the world the image of an unprincipled Virgin Mary. Chapter 1621. Just as Jiang Pengji had guessed, An Shui had deliberately recruited all the young and strong people who could be taken away. The remaining old, weak, sick, and disabled would not have enough food to get through the winter. Even though a large number of refugees had starved or frozen to death in previous years, wasn't Jiang Pengji in charge this time? Jiang Pengji was a feudal lord with an extremely good reputation among the people. If there were huge casualties among the people under her rule, it would be a huge blow to her reputation. If An Shui took the opportunity to send people to incite these refugees who could not survive to attack her, she would be in grave danger. Either Jiang Pengji gave up her reputation among the people and let tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people starve or freeze to death. Otherwise, Jiang Pengji would embezzle the provisions used for the war. In this way, the morale of the army would definitely be shaken by the lack of provisions in the spring. Either way, Jiang Pengji was at a disadvantage. If that wasn't the case, why would Chui be so generous as to give away 2 prefectures? In the eyes of the outside world, Jiang Pengji had conquered nearly 2 prefectures of Nanxing in one go. Her momentum was like the sun at high noon. If it weren't for the change in the weather, she would have led her troops south and destroyed Chui's old nest. In reality, that was not the case. The profits that could be extracted from the 2 prefectures were too low. If she had not sent people to dig up graves to earn a sum of money, Jiang Pengji was afraid that even emptying her private treasury would not be able to make up for the financial deficit. Regardless of whether it was Chui or the people under Chui's tent, they all thought that Jiang Pengji would be badly battered by the refugees in the 2 prefectures who were crying piteously for food, and that she would simply provoke the people into boiling with resentment. In the end, Jiang Pengji used reality to slap their faces until they were swollen. "What did you say?" Chui put down the wine cup with a clang. The Xichang emperor concubine, who was nestled in his arms, was so frightened that she knelt down and begged for forgiveness. He didn't have any tender feelings for the fairer sex. He stared at the messenger with a stern expression. "Are you sure?" The messenger said, "I'm sure. The news from everywhere is the same." After Lu Shi occupied the 2 prefectures, the people, and Chui abruptly raised his hand to interrupt him. His brows were tightly knitted together, leaving behind several deep wrinkles. "There's no need to say anything else. Send someone to invite the military advisor over for a discussion." Chui had wanted to watch a good show, but he hadn't expected the people he had sent to bring back news that was completely different from what he had imagined. After Jiang Pengji took over the 2 regions that were of little value, not only did the people under her rule not die on a large scale, but they also had a relatively peaceful winter. Wei Xi seized the time to dispatch the Internet Water Army. Every day, he would publish countless articles to flatter Jiang Pengji. Wei Xi's ability to control the navy was far beyond the standards of this era. The feudal lords who were once enemies with Jiang Pengji were often defeated. Even though the aristocratic families of the Nanxing and Nanxing states scolded her for digging up graves, her reputation among the common people was unexpectedly good. "He who wins the hearts of the people will win the world." These words could not only be applied to the ruler of the world, but also to the feudal vassals who were striving to become the ruler of the world. It was true that Jiang Pengji had offended the aristocrats of the 2 prefectures, but she had also won over nearly 1 million people from the 2 prefectures. In comparison, there was no harm in offending a few thousand landowning households whose teeth had been plucked out. How many years had it been since the citizens of Nanxing had a war-free winter? Since the beginning of the calamity of the southern barbarians, the common people had always been in deep water and suffering. At night, they were worried that bandits would suddenly break into their homes to kill and loot. It could be seen how heavy their shadow was. She, an outsider marquis, had done what the Nanxing marquis had not done. The common people longed for peace and a stable life. Jiang Pengji had let them see hope. To further embellish Jiang Pengji's lofty and selfless image, Wei Xi had even revealed some facts, such as how rare it was for Jiang Pengji to distribute warm clothes, and how she had almost emptied her private treasury to ensure that the people of the 2 prefectures had a peaceful winter. Although she had not brought the best days to the common people, she had done her best. The common people should know how to be satisfied. After Wei Xi's manipulation, the common people of the 2 prefectures wished they could worship Jiang Pengji as their savior. Crazy. They're all crazy. What kind of magic potion did Lu Shi feed the common people? When the aristocrats found out that there was a thief's hole near the graves of their clans, they were so angry that their lungs were about to explode. However, when they heard the common people singing praises of Jiang Pengji, they almost felt like they had been born. Chui and his group had the same thoughts as them. and Shui sent people to spread rumors that were unfavorable to Jiang Pengji. In the end, the people who spread the rumors were beaten half to death by the common people. They were simply making trouble out of nothing. Was it fake that Jiang Pengji had dug up graves? Was it fake that Jiang Pengji had slaughtered countless people all these years? She was clearly a tyrant, but she had been portrayed as a white lotus flower. Were they all blind? And Shui's first plan had failed, so he came up with another plan. Unfortunately, it was stopped by Hua Yuan. The most important thing now is to prepare for next spring. The soldiers under Lu Shi's command have sufficient protection against the cold. A surprise attack won't be very effective. And Shui sighed and said, "That's fine. I was too impatient." When faced with Jiang Pengji, and Shui was lying when he said that he did not feel pressured. Not only did he feel pressured, but he also felt a mountain of pressure. It was just that he could not tell these feelings to others. He was the Lord. If even he had the intention to fight, how could his subordinates have the confidence to win? Hua Yuan was Shui's most trusted confidant at the moment. He calmed him down with a few words. After Shui's consolation, his anxious mood was greatly improved. He said to Hua Yuan, "You haven't visited him in a long time. Do you have time to visit him in the near future?" Hua Yuan smiled apologetically. "I have neglected the young master. This is my oversight." And Shui did not really like that air, but he had some problems. He had no choice but to make his adopted son his heir. This was good for calming people down. However, at that moment, Hua Yuan quietly told him something that made Shui's heart tremble. He introduced Shui to a divine doctor who had a lot of experience in treating men's private matters. And Shui was tempted. He secretly met with the divine doctor. The moment an expert made a move, one would know whether he was real or not. The doctor's diagnosis was exactly the same as Shui's. Unlike other doctors who said they were helpless, this doctor had a way to cure him. Of course, Shui hoped to have his own bloodline. He was so happy that he could not suppress it. His expression twisted for a moment. Are you serious?" And Shui tried hard to suppress his joy. He asked the doctor carefully. The white-haired doctor said, "Duke Wuxia, there will be an effect after a month of careful recuperation. After 3 months of recuperation, the hidden illness will be cured." And Shui said, "Then I'll have to trouble you to prescribe medicine." The doctor said, "A doctor has a benevolent heart. This is a doctor's duty." "Duke Wuxia, you are too serious." At the side, Hua Yuan also said, "Congratulations on regaining Lin, my lord." And Shui nodded repeatedly. After a while, he said, "Take care of Mian, lest the child feels uncomfortable." He had raised that adopted son as the young master for a few years. They had some father-son relationship. This matter had to be kept from him for now. Hua Yuan said, "Your subject understands. Don't worry, my lord." He brought the doctor to prescribe medicine in secret. When there was no one around, the doctor's face, which had been calm before, turned a little pale. Hua Yuan laughed coldly. "Do what you have to do. Don't talk too much. If you talk too much, not only will your own tongue be pulled out, your entire family will not be able to escape." Chapter 1622. There was no emotion in Hua Yuan's eyes. He was so cold that it made one's heart tremble. His aura made even the old physician, who was used to seeing life and death, tremble. He was an ordinary physician. He had spent his entire life practicing medicine and saving lives. No matter who his patients were or what status they had, he treated them all the same. Even though his medical skills were not low among his peers, the old physician felt that he was still far from being the leading doctor of his dreams. In order to live up to the promise he had made when he first entered the profession, he had never let his guard down for decades. He had never expected that the clean reputation he had maintained for most of his life would be destroyed by his own hands. This young man before him had threatened him with the lives of his entire family and even his relatives. The old physician had no choice but to comply. He had struggled at first. He and Hua Yuan had lied to Shui and misdiagnosed others. Wasn't this going against his medical ethics? However, the old physician knew the consequences of going against Hua Yuan. He could clearly see that Hua Yuan was definitely not a person who cared about human lives. Killing people was as normal as eating and drinking to him. The old physician had experienced a mental torture. In the end, he had given up on his integrity and helped Hua Yuan commit evil deeds. He only hoped that after Hua Yuan achieved his goal, the other would be merciful, or find some conscience and spare the old physician's family. Even though the old physician was old, he wasn't blind. He knew one thing: the more one knew, the earlier one would die. If the old physician knew Hua Yuan's secret, would the latter let him live? Clearly, this was impossible. The old physician knew that he would die after this. Do you have a secret formula for aiding pregnancy? Hua Yuan leaned against the medicine cabinet and watched the old physician write down the formula. He suddenly asked, scaring the old physician so much that his hands trembled. Aiding pregnancy, this. The old physician said awkwardly. Duke Duoshi's body looks no different from an ordinary man's, and he can even sleep with women. However, his seed is dead. No matter how fertile the soil is, a dead seed can't germinate. Even though the old physician had many accomplishments in this field and had cured many men with fertility problems in the past, he really could not do anything about Shui's situation. Even if he had a secret formula for aiding pregnancy, Shui could not impregnate a woman. This would be making things difficult for the old man. Hua Yuan pinched a piece of dry grass to his lips and smiled indifferently. I know that Duke Duoshi's body is no different from a natural eunuch. I don't need you to remind me. A man who couldn't get a woman pregnant, even if he became a feudal lord, would still be an eunuch. Hua Yuan had always been certain that he was Lu Shi. How could he let a crippled man order him around? He also wanted this world. Thus, Shui was an obstacle in Hua Yuan's eyes, a stumbling block that he had to get rid of. The old doctor asked awkwardly, if that's the case, why do you need to use a secret formula to aid in pregnancy? Half of Hua Yuan's body was leaning against the medicine cabinet. His slightly loose Confucian robe made him look extremely flirtatious. There was a hint of a smile in his eyes and he looked a little cynical. However, behind this flirtatious was a poison that could seal one's throat at the sight of blood. The old physician secretly sighed and thought that it was a pity. Didn't you diagnose Duke Duoshi and say that he has a small chance of impregnating a woman after a month of recuperation? Hua Yuan sneered and countered with a question. On the contrary, the old physician was rendered speechless. What a lot of information. Shui couldn't possibly impregnate a woman. If Hua Yuan's secret formula to aid in pregnancy made Shui's woman pregnant. From this, it could be deduced that the child in her belly would definitely belong to old Wang next door. Shui was going to be cuckolded. The old physician secretly clicked his tongue. As a physician, he was used to seeing birth, aging, sickness, death, and disputes. Some of the fights and tricks of the rich were even more complicated and bizarre than what was described in the novels of the common folk. Art came from life and was above life. That was roughly what it meant. Was Hua Yuan trying to make Shui a cuckold and have his own bloodline replace Shui's position as the heir? For a moment, all kinds of melodramatic plots came one after another. The old physician could only sigh inwardly. The rich and powerful really knew how to play. How could an ordinary person think of such a dirty trick? Not only did he want to make someone die without an heir, he also wanted to eat him until he died with regrets. Just tell me directly. Yes or no? Hua Yuan sneered. The faster and stronger the effects, the better. The old physician said anxiously, bearing children is a natural heavenly Tao. It has a lot to do with the physical condition of both the man and the woman. It's like the soil in spring plowing and a seed full of vitality. Only when the two meet will they bear a rich fruit. If the seed is weak and the soil is fertile, the fetus will most likely die in the womb. If the seed is strong and the soil is barren, even if the child can be born successfully, the child will be born with a congenital deficiency. If someone interferes with natural reproduction, even if the child is successful, the child that is born will most likely be. He rambled on for a while, but Hua Yuan only responded with 9 words. Just tell me directly. Yes or no? Yes, the old physician said in a low voice. But that prescription is too strong. If the woman takes it, it will definitely harm her body. That's good. Remember to make a copy for me. Hua Yuan took the prescription from the old physician's hands and had him make a few more doses of medicine. Because Hua Yuan had given An Shui hope of regaining his bloodline, the latter valued the former even more. It wasn't that he didn't suspect it, but the information that came back from his private investigations said that the old physician had great achievements in the field of male reproductive diseases. His medical skills were far superior to others. An Shui took the medicine prescribed by the old physician without worry. After a period of time, he felt even more energetic. Hua Yuan also gave him a secret prescription to help women conceive. This secret prescription was harmless to the fetus, but it would drain the mother's essence in exchange for the most suitable environment for Lin Er's birth. An Shui was overjoyed, but he was not too satisfied with Hua Yuan's plan to give these medicines to the Xichang imperial concubine. How can a mere imperial concubine of a fallen nation be qualified to bear my child? An Shui placed great importance on bloodline. The Xichang imperial concubine was beautiful and literate. She had good qualities, but her background was not good. Even if An Shui was obsessed with his child, he did not want his future child to have such a lowly mother. She's just using her to test the doctor's prescription. If the effects of the prescription are real, it's not too late for the Lord to choose a mistress with a noble bloodline for the young master. The son is valued by his mother. The position of the young master will definitely belong to the future young master. Every word he said and every action he did made An Shui feel extremely comfortable. Even though Hua Yuan was the West Master who had adopted his son, Hua Yuan still valued him, the Lord, and the future young master. This was good. Chapter 1623. An Shui took the medicine according to the doctor's instructions. He even asked Hua Yuan to give the medicine to the Xichang Emperor's concubine, who drank it 3 times a day. The Xichang Emperor's concubine didn't know that An Shui was infertile, nor did she know what kind of ferocious effects the medicine she drank had. She was living under someone else's roof and had to obey. Recently, however, An Shui had been more excited than usual when he slept with her. She couldn't take it. She had a tiny bit of hope in her heart. If she could get a boy, when An Shui had a son, wouldn't the heir be her son? Because of these thoughts, the Xichang Emperor's concubine had become more tender and attentive to An Shui. An Shui didn't mind giving her more love. No one knew that all of this was planned by Hua Yuan. He was playing a very big game of chess, a game that no one could figure out even if they racked their brains. No one knew that suggesting An Shui to withdraw his troops and give up 2 prefectures to Jiangpengji was also part of his plan. Not only was it to deplete Jiangpengji's rations, but it also had a deeper meaning, to stall for time and buy more time for his plan. What was Hua Yuan's plan? Was he just trying to make his lord a cuckold? No, he wasn't that vulgar. Other than himself, only 2 people could see through Hua Yuan's plan. One was the old doctor whose life was in Hua Yuan's hands. The old doctor knew that Hua Yuan was going to make An Shui a cuckold. The other was Hua Yuan's favorite in the eyes of outsiders, the Xichang prince. Not only did the Xichang prince know that Hua Yuan was going to make Shui a cuckold, but he also knew exactly how. Speaking of which, the Xichang prince still had some pride in his bones. Because of this pride, he had underestimated the chaotic world outside of Xichang. He had run into a wall with Jiang Pengji. Unwilling to give up, he had come to Shui to try his luck. In the end, he had lost himself and his sister. When he found out that Shui's trusted aide, Hua Yuan, wanted to be a boy toy, he had almost fainted from anger. At this time, men were popular. It was very common for the sons of rich families to keep a few prostitutes to relieve their boredom. Many of the rich Lingjuan study attendants also played the role of servant girls. On one hand, she accompanied her Langjun to study and practice calligraphy, taking care of his daily life, and on the other hand, she warmed his bed and vented her lust. Of course, not every study boy was like this, but this phenomenon was very common in the circle of aristocratic families. He had said a lot of nonsense just to show that masculinity was really common in this era. Other than the fact that no man would marry another man openly, it was almost the same as an ordinary married couple. Many legal wives and concubines would only be able to carry on the family line when faced with such a shameless man. In the words of the viewers in the live stream room, this was probably the rumored true love. The Prince of Xichang was in despair. He thought that he was going to be subservient as well. He learned from the lowliest male pet and fawned on someone of the same sex. In the end, surprisingly, Hua Yuan did not touch him. Instead, he would often reveal a look of astonishment and disgust. As time passed, the Xichang prince forgot about the humiliation of being a male pet. He even felt a little angry. Was he that unattractive? Hua Yuan said harshly, "You're just a mortal, that's all. Have sex with you? I'm afraid of getting dirty." The Prince of Xichang was so angry that he almost fainted. Before the imperial family fell, he was also famous in the capital. How could he be considered an ordinary person? How much better was Hua Yuan? He actually thought that he was dirty. Hua Yuan could tell what was going on in his mind. He sneered and said, "The combination of yin and yang is the right way of human relations. You don't want to walk the water path, but walk the dry path that is used for the cycle of 5 grains. Isn't that dirty?" Hua Yuan, who firmly believed that he was Lu Shi, liked the opposite sex even though he was more manly than a woman. He had no choice. This body belonged to a man. She could only pinch her nose and accept it. Her sexual orientation also changed. He could not accept the dirty path that was used to get rid of filth. The Prince of Xichang was not afraid of rectal prolapse, but he was afraid of getting sick. After learning of Hua Yuan's thoughts, the Prince of Xichang was so angry that he fainted again. He was a prince. How could he want to be a male pet? Hua Yuan, this lowly commoner, really thought that he was someone important. Soon, he knew that instead of feigning civility with such a person, he would rather be a male pet that was subservient. One day, Hua Yuan made a request to the Prince of Xichang that made him shudder. The Prince of Xichang was stunned for a long time. What did you say?" The Prince of Xichang was so scared that his face turned pale. Disgust and disgust were written between his brows. He looked at Hua Yuan not as if he was looking at a person, but as if he was looking at a ghost. "My sister and I are siblings from the same mother, but you want me to. She is your lord's concubine. You instigate another man to have an improper relationship with her. It looks like you have a lot of complaints about your lord." He did not hear wrong. Hua Yuan, this crazy man, actually wanted him to do something that would cause disharmony with his own sister. Not only that, he also wanted her to get pregnant. "You're crazy." However, Hua Yuan looked at him with a gaze that seemed to be able to see through his heart. "What are you laughing at? It's quite interesting to hear this from you," Hua Yuan said disdainfully. Does the so-called royal family also care about human relations? The people of this era were obsessed with bloodlines. The gentry clans were so. The royal family, which was regarded as nouveau riche by the gentry clans, were even more obsessed than the gentry clans. In order to ensure the purity of the bloodline, it was very common for close relatives to marry. It was even more common for the royal family to have sexual relations in private. The Xichang royal family, which was not particular about their origins, was so resistant to having sexual relations between siblings. It was an eye-opener for Hua Yuan. Hearing the mockery in Hua Yuan's words, the Xichang prince was both angry and angry. Hua Yuan laughed. If I were you, I probably wouldn't make such a foolish choice. You're saying I'm stupid? Compared to Hua Yuan, who had schemed against Shui at some point, the Xichang prince was ashamed of his inferiority, but he was not stupid. Is it not stupid? This is a ready-made and only chance for you to escape from the situation of being looked down upon by others. If I were you, I would firmly grasp this opportunity and escape from the current predicament before making other plans. If the child in the Empress concubine's belly is yours, no one but you, the Empress concubine, and me will know. Everyone will only think that the child is Duke Duoxi's. In this situation, the only obstacle that can stop you is Duke Duoxi's adopted son. Once the adopted son dies, the future position of young master can only be inherited by a child with pure Xichang blood. Hua Yuan's words both tempted and frightened the Xichang prince. What kind of heart did this person in front of him have? The son is weak, but the mother is strong. If something happens to Duke Duoxi, won't you be the one to reap the benefits? The Xichang prince endured his chattering teeth and said, the one to reap the benefits is clearly you. Chapter 1624. The Xichang prince asked carefully. What if I refuse? Hua Yuan said coldly. Do you think you're the only one in the world with that bit of flesh between your legs? There are plenty of men who can impregnate women. I chose you because your identity can make Duke Duoxi lower his guard. If you spend a long time alone with the Empress concubine, he won't be suspicious. To make Shui a cuckold, there had to be time and space for the adulterer to fully display his skills. When he had asked Shui for the prince to be his male pet, it was only because the prince's identity was useful and Shui would not be suspicious. After hearing this, the Xichang prince's fingertips trembled uncontrollably. If there was medicine for regret in the world, he would rather stay in Xichang than come here. I didn't expect that you had such a plan. Do you really think you can control everything? Hua Yuan's words were the last straw that broke the camel's back. I don't keep useless people who know secrets. If I'm in a bad mood, I'll cut off your tongue, chop off your hands, and send you to a brothel to live for a few days. If I'm in a good mood, I might give you a quick death, Hua Yuan said with a smile. Of course, I can't control everything, but I can control your life and death. You should also think carefully about what is more important. If you die, there's no hope. If you can endure humiliation and live, you might have a chance at survival. You're a smart man, you should know what to choose. Hua Yuan saw through the Xichang prince. The prince said he would resist, but his heart and eyes were filled with ambition and schemes. He would do anything to achieve his goals. Hua Yuan hated hypocrites who said one thing but meant another. They were clearly filthy, but they clung to their last shred of dignity and refused to let go. Hypocrite. What Hua Yuan wanted to do was to peel off this disgusting fake skin and expose the ugly face behind it to the light of day. Are you going to do it or not? Hua Yuan's voice was like a death warrant from hell. The prince was so frightened that he sweated profusely. The sticky sweat quickly soaked his inner clothes. He growled in a voice close to pain and despair. I'll do it. I'll do it, all right? He didn't even use the noble title of Gu. He was too scared to use it. Looking at the prince who looked like he would rather die, Hua Yuan sneered coldly in disdain, mocking the other party's pretense. As long as he appeared to be in enough pain and struggle, he would be able to cover up his shameful thoughts and ambitions and blame everything on Hua Yuan's coercion. Hypocrisy was nauseating. It was better to be honest. Hua Yuan's plan proceeded in an orderly manner. He wanted to transplant a vast grassland into An Shui's head and let him herd sheep and horses as he pleased. He also needed the other person involved in the incident to agree. Compared to the Xichang prince's hypocrisy and refusal, the Xichang empress concubine was more straightforward. This made Hua Yuan look at her differently. Of course, this was also related to Hua Yuan revealing to her that An Shui was infertile. Her inability to bear children meant that she would always be a tool to warm An's bed. Her usefulness was even shorter than her youth. Once her beauty faded, An Shui would no longer care about her, and others would forget about her. The empress concubine was just a concubine to warm An's bed, a weak woman who could not control her own fate. Not every woman in the world could transform into a superior person like Lu Shi, let alone become a leader of the world like her. Most women could only be like rootless duckweed, suffering the torment and destruction of a chaotic world. The more beautiful a woman was, the more dangerous her situation was. Men proved their strength by conquering them. Women relied on jealousy and fighting for men's love as their capital. An Shui could not impregnate anyone. This was equivalent to cutting off the empress concubine's future and hope. She agreed to Hua Yuan's plan. She could only cry silently in the dead of night. She did not understand why some women could live lives that made all women in the world envious and jealous, like Jiang Pengji, while others had their fates manipulated by others. She was the high and mighty empress concubine of Xichang. How had she fallen to such a state? Hatred and jealousy twisted her heart so tightly that she almost could not breathe. How unfair fate was. She thought she was talented and learned, and her ambition was no less than a man's. If she had Jiang Pengji's starting point and had so many loyal followers, she would not have done any worse than her. It was a pity that these assumptions would never have the chance to come true. Jiang Pengji did not know this. Even if she knew, she would not care. Those who did not attract jealousy were mediocre. She was so outstanding and powerful. If she did not attract jealousy, did it not mean that she was still mediocre? Compared to other things, she preferred to go hunting, barbecuing, winter swimming, and catching fish in the winter. None of these interests seemed to have anything to do with official work. Won't your subordinates rebel when you do this? Yang Tao had a thick fox fur cloak draped over his shoulders. His feet were propped up on the side of the boat. Half of his feet were submerged in the cold river water. If one looked closely, they would see that Yang Tao's upper body was naked. He only wore loose pants that covered his body. His long hair was wet. He had just climbed out of the river. His winter swimming partner was still underwater. Who was Yang Tao's winter swimming partner? No one would believe it, but it was his former nemesis and current superior, Jiang Pengji. You'll get used to this kind of thing. Jiang Pengji dove into the water. She swam close to the surface of the water for 2 to 3 feet. She was like a female demon born in the river. How can I get used to it? Yang Tao almost choked from laughing. Different people have different fates. If it was Xiaoyang, he would have torn me apart. They also want to tear me apart, but they can't beat them. Jiang Pengji emerged from the water and smiled. They'll be thankful that I don't cause trouble for them. Zixiao and the others will help me deal with the unimportant documents and pick out the ones that I have to read personally. Master Lu's words seemed to be a little twisted. Yang Tao smiled and reached out to her. He used a little strength to pull her up. Jiang Pengji picked up the cloak and wrapped it around her body. She raised her hand and tucked her long hair behind her ears. The two of them brought their guards to swim in the river. Yang Tao was a good swimmer. He did not expect Jiang Pengji, who grew up in the north, to be so good. He was tired from swimming and climbed onto the boat to rest. Jiang Pengji was still jumping around in the water. He wondered if she could swim all the way from downstream to upstream with her physical strength. This isn't twisted logic. This is the truth. The salted fishes were excited to see their former rivals get along peacefully. But what was more exciting was Yang Tao's figure. Nide Yida, even though I used to be a die-hard fan of beauty I want to climb the wall after seeing Yang Tao's angelic figure. Qingfeng Banshui, you don't show off when you're wearing clothes. When you take them off, your hormones are about to overflow. Chapter 1625. Jiang Pengji's streaming room was a mix of good and bad people, gays, and sluts emerged one after another. When they found out that the content of the streaming was no longer about boring government affairs, but about hormones, they couldn't stand it anymore. A group of losers clamored to F***ck Yang Tao, but the most improper ones were the gays and sluts, who stared at the bulge under Yang Tao's tight abdominal muscles and blushed. In contrast, Jiang Pengji didn't get much attention. They saw that face every day, and he wouldn't show his abdominal muscles to them. Yang Tao, the little angel, was a real warrior. He was super generous, and people blushed. Not only were the gays and sluts clamoring to push Yang Tao down, but a group of weak salted fish also followed the crowd and shouted slogans. Aod Lu Ming, if I'm the next emperor of fortune, I'll tear off Yang Tao's underpants. Xinshur Si Mi Cha, after watching the analysis of the gods in the streaming room, I feel a deep sense of inferiority. Didn't they say that men in ancient times didn't eat well? Their food was not nutritious, so they weren't tall, had bad looks, and were out of shape. But Yang Tao was such a man. Tai Di Qingjing, if I could transmigrate, I'd like to be in Yang Tao's underpants and flirt with him every day. Jiang Pengji looked at the group of people who did not have the slightest AC and shook her head secretly. Yang Tao could lift them up with one hand, spin them around twice, and then throw them out. Who gave them the confidence to push him down and say they were going to F***ck him? Jiang Pengji's control of her expression was as pure as fire. Even though she complained in her heart, Yang Tao didn't notice anything. He took out 2 jars of liquor from the cabin and gave one to each of them. I never thought I'd be on the same boat as Master Lu and drink with him. Is it hard to imagine? Jiang Pengji said, I think it's within expectations. It's nothing new. Yang Tao carefully pondered over her words and heard the arrogance and confidence in them. When he said he never thought about it, it meant that he never thought he would lose to Jiang Pengji, and it also meant that he would be put in an important position after losing to Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji's answer was straightforward. She firmly believed that she would win against Yang Tao. Yang Tao's failure was within her expectations. Sigh, he was such an annoying person, but he wasn't beaten to death with a sack. Yang Tao had a good temper, but he still wanted to beat Jiang Pengji up. It could be seen how much people loved and hated her. Did Lord Lu have such a temper when he was young? Jiang Pengji finished half a jar of liquor in one breath. She propped her upper body up with her hands behind her back. Her feet were submerged in the river. Her clothes were half wet and half dry and stuck to her skin, vaguely outlining her wonderful figure. However, most of her body was covered by the cloak. Yang Tao didn't pay much attention to women other than his wife, and the guards didn't dare look straight at her. Salted fish was only focused on licking Yang Tao's abs, so no one paid her any attention. What do you think? Yang Tao smiled. If Lord Lu had such a temper when he was young, he probably wouldn't have lived to this day. This kind of temperament was too infuriating. Jiang Pengji smiled, revealing her white teeth. Her smile seemed to be more radiant than the scorching sun above her head. How could that be? When I was young, my personality was much worse than it is now. When I grow up, I will also become more mature. She wasn't lying. She did have a bad temper when she was young. In the words of some of her old comrades, every time she looked at someone, her gaze was as if they owed her $5 million. She was silent and sinister. It was just that the image of a quiet iceberg was fine, but once she opened her mouth, she was a chatterbox. She talked until people's hearts were made of glass. Yang Tao smiled awkwardly. Now she was considered mature and steady. How mischievous was Jiang Pengji when she was young. The two of them drank more than 10 jars of liquor. Yang Tao was drunk on the 3rd jar. Although his alcohol tolerance was good, it was based on sake. The after effects of the liquor were not something that could be compared to the sake that had been blended with water. Although hard liquor was good, one should not drink it too much. Jiang Pengji drank the rest of the liquor alone and casually threw the jar into the river. After enjoying the breeze of the river for a long time, she said to the guards, "Let's go back. Remember to boil some soup to sober him up so that he won't catch a cold." When the group of people reached the shore, Jiang Pengji's clothes were almost dry. She raised her hand and hung the god-slaying sword on her waist, returning to her normal attire. She leaped onto the horse's back and was about to give the order to return when her brows suddenly jumped. Under the sunlight, her brown eyes flashed with a hint of danger. "Wait," the guard said, "do you have any instructions, my lord?" Jiang Pengji said, "You bring Yang Tao back by water. I want to walk alone." The guards looked at each other and said hesitantly, "The military counselors have repeatedly reminded us not to let the Lord be alone." Jiang Pengji smiled and tightened the reins. The corners of her lips curled indifferently. "Am I the Lord, or are they the Lord?" Her voice was neither light nor heavy, but it revealed a bit of chilling sternness. The guards knelt on one knee and did not dare to raise their heads. When they came back to their senses, they were shocked to find that the clothes on their backs were drenched in sweat. "I just want to be alone and hunt some prey to go back. I will catch up with you soon. Just report to the military counselors." The guards did not dare to hesitate and could only follow Jiang Pengji's orders. They did not have the guts to ask Jiang Pengji why she sent them away to hunt alone, but the salted fish were not afraid. Jiang Pengji said, "There is an ambush ahead. If they follow me, they will only drag me down. Other than dying, they will not contribute anything else." She did not hide her disdain. The salted fish were speechless. There was an ambush nearby. To be precise, there was an ambush in the forest ahead. Everyone knew that Jiang Pengji was a maverick lord. She loved hunting and drinking. Every time she was free, she would bring people to hunt. It was common for her to hunt alone. She dared to do so because she was skilled and daring. There were people in this world who could assassinate her, but those people were in another world. Based on the combat power of this world alone, she had never been afraid. But others did not think so, especially the enemy. "Gui kai guo fengxiu, I suddenly have an idea. If someone prophesied that she is light and unprepared, although he has millions of men, he will be walking alone in the Central Plains. Like an assassin lying in ambush, he will be alone. In my opinion, he will die in the hands of an ordinary man. He will probably be slapped in the face. Tudu feichio, how is it, probably? He will definitely be slapped in the face. He will be so swollen that even his own mother can't recognize him. How could an assassin be enough for Jiang Pengji's combat power? If he did not bring a mighty army of more than 10,000, how could he touch the hem of her clothes?" The salted fish closed their eyes and mocked Jiang Pengji. She wore a red robe and tied her hair into a high ponytail. She held a bow in her left hand and a god-slaying sword hung on her waist. She went into the depths of the dense forest alone. When she easily hunted down 2 deer, she heard the faint sound of arrows piercing through the air. these hidden arrows were all smeared with poison. Every one of them was aimed at her vital parts. The assassin saw that she did not respond and was secretly delighted. But the corner of his mouth had just curled up halfway when he froze. Jiang Pengji, who should have been shot and fallen, did not fall. He took a closer look and saw that the other party was holding a familiar arrow in her right hand. Chapter 1626. Qing Fengwenpu, there's really an assassination. Are they lining up to be killed? Hua Hua, don't be strong, the world is so beautiful. Isn't it good to be alive? Why did you come here to court death? Tang Song Ci, I can feel the host's murderous intent through the screen. Other people would panic when they encounter an assassination, but she is different. She is eager to try. Sigh, even though I'm super scared, I won't leave just because of the host's looks and skills. Fairy Queen's Crimson, I'm waiting for the streamer to go on a killing spree and smash the heads of these killers. They were even more excited than Jiang Pengji. They couldn't wait to see her deal with the assassins. Jiang Pengji did not disappoint them. She crushed the arrow in her hand with a little force. Her eyes were filled with killing intent. The assassins hiding in the forest exchanged glances, and in the next second, they heard the sound of weapons being unsheathed. Kill, no matter how the outside world described Jiang Pengji's bravery, those who had not seen it with their own eyes would never believe it, especially when Jiang Pengji's figure was so deceiving. Who could have imagined that such a tall but not burly female body would have such powerful combat strength? A battle on the battlefield was different from a small-scale confrontation. The former emphasized the aesthetics of violence and did not have any techniques to speak of, while the latter relied more on techniques and cooperation. Jiang Pengji was alone and had no guards by her side, but the killers were specially trained men of sacrifice. It was still unknown who would emerge victorious. Jiang Pengji looked coldly at the enemies rushing out of the dense forest and sneered disdainfully. With a swoosh, she unsheathed the god-slaying saber. Facing the killers that were coming at her from all directions, she did not retreat. Instead, she advanced. She even felt a little pleased. Her reaction made the killer dumbfounded. Was the Duke of Lanting not joking? While he was still in a daze, the blade was already in front of him. Her knife was extremely fast. Before the killer who bore the brunt of the attack could feel any pain, his neck was already kissed by the blade. Just a second ago, the assassin was still thinking about how to kill the enemy, but in the next second, he felt a chill in his throat. Someone's blood was spurting out, dyeing everything in sight red. The world spun around him, and his body fell to the ground with a dull thud. A question popped up in the killer's mind: why did the surrounding temperature drop so much? Why did the sky suddenly darken? Why does my neck hurt so much? He tried to open his mouth to say something, but he couldn't even sigh. Of course, Jiang Pengji did not care what the assassin was thinking before he died. She only knew that the god-slaying sword was trembling with excitement. This saber had been wronged following him. It wasn't easy for him to get a taste of meat, so he naturally had to kill to his heart's content. Of course, she knew that capturing the killers alive was better than killing them. If there was no one to command them, the killers wouldn't have ambushed Jiang Pengji for no reason. However, there was no reason to reject the heads that came to her. It was the same to leave one or two of them alive. There were a total of 100 assassins in this group, and every one of them was a meticulously trained death warrior. It was impossible to raise them unless one was from a noble family. Nurturing a qualified killer not only required a large amount of resources, but also a considerable amount of manpower and energy. Ordinary rich families could not afford to raise high-quality death warriors. Jiang Pengji roughly knew their origins as soon as they fought. They were most likely related to the Nanxing aristocrats. Jiang Pengji was mentally prepared that they would send someone to assassinate her. The ancient people of this era could not even accept cremation. They firmly believed that cremation meant dying without a complete corpse, being smashed to pieces, and desecrating the dead. The higher the family, the more they were particular about it. They could not even accept cremation, not to mention Jiang Pengji digging up their ancestors' graves and plundering the deceased's gold, silver, and funerary objects. Even if she had 1,000 or 10,000 reasons, Jiang Pengji had still offended them. They did not make a move earlier because they were not confident that Jiang Pengji would be heavily guarded. What about now? She had courted death by bringing a few guards out for a winter hunt. Unfortunately, Yang Tao was with her. If they could assassinate Jiang Pengji and frame Yang Tao for the crime, they would be able to wash their hands clean and watch Jiang Pengji's power fall apart with a smile. These ideas were not bad, but they had to be based on the premise that Jiang Pengji was really assassinated. As long as Jiang Pengji did not die, these wishful thinking could only be a calculation and not a reality. If there were bystanders watching from the dense forest, they would see a red figure shuttling and dodging among the killers at a speed that ordinary people could not achieve. Every time the blade struck, a bloody arc would be drawn and a fresh life would be taken away. No matter how the killers shot arrows in the dark, besieged, or plotted against her, Jiang Pengji was unscathed. She was even more slippery than a loach. From the dense forest came the jarring sound of swords and knives clashing. At the same time, a group of guards followed Jiang Pengji's orders and sent Yang Tao back via the waterway. Dusk fell. The temperature of the water was colder than on land. Yang Tao suddenly shivered and woke up in a daze. "What time is it now?" Yang Tao asked vaguely. The guard reported respectfully. Yang Tao nodded in a daze. He sat on the deck for a while before regaining some of his senses. "Where is Master Lu?" He remembered that he had drunk a lot of wine. His head was still hurting. Before he passed out, he remembered that Master Lu drank more than him. The guard hesitated and said, "The Lord went hunting. She specially ordered us to escort you back." Yang Tao subconsciously said, "Ah." He did not suspect anything, but he quickly figured out that something was wrong. The number of guards that Jiang Pengji brought out was not reduced. The number of guards that she brought out was not reduced either. These guards were all here. Was there anyone else around Jiang Pengji? Yang Tao did not expect Jiang Pengji to be so bold as to jump around alone. He did not think of this for a moment. Did Master Lu say when she will return? The guard said, "I don't know." Yang Tao asked, "She didn't say?" "It's getting dark. It's not safe outside. If they did not go back soon, someone might cause trouble." Even though she was a feudal lord, Jiang Pengji seemed to have access restrictions. If she spent the night outside without informing her, wouldn't the civil and military officials in her camp go crazy? The guard looked troubled. He said hesitantly, "The Lord did not bring anyone with her. She did not say when she will return." Yang Tao did not react for a moment. It took him a while to digest the guard's words. "Did not bring anyone? What do you mean by did not bring anyone?" Yang Tao's voice rose an octave. The guard lowered his head even more. "The Lord does not like to have people following her. This time, do you know how many people in this world want her life? Even if she wants your lives, you can't leave your posts without permission." Yang Tao was completely shocked. At the same time, he sobered up. His tone was stern, which was rare. "Order Master Lu to turn around immediately." Chapter 1627. Although Yang Tao's order was for Jiang Pengji's own good, it went against Jiang Pengji's previous orders, so the guards did not dare to act. "What are you standing there for?" Yang Tao could not understand the guards' actions. If something really happened to someone, it would be fine if they took the blame, but they just had to drag him down with them. Yang Tao did not want to lose his life because of this. It would be too unjust to die, the guard said awkwardly. We have no choice but to obey the Lord's orders. If the Lord pursues this matter, Yang Tao asked in return, if something really happens to Lord Lu, who among you can shoulder the responsibility? Seeing that the guards did not give a definite answer, Yang Tao snatched the oar from the boatman's hands. You can't disobey Lord Lu's orders, and I won't force you. I'll go on my own. You can return on your own. The guards looked at each other in dismay. For a moment, they were in a dilemma. After all, the Lord's orders were for them to bring Yang Tao back via the waterway. If Yang Tao refused to cooperate, no one would be able to back down. After hesitating for a while, the guards still plucked up their courage and obeyed Yang Tao's orders. They turned around to look for Jiang Pengji. Firstly, if they were reprimanded by the Lord, at least Yang Tao would take the blame. Even if she got angry, they would not be directed at them. Secondly, as Yang Tao said, if something happened to the Lord while she was alone, they would not be able to absolve themselves of the blame. Yang Tao was in a hurry to rush back to look for Jiang Pengji, but he did not forget about other things. Send someone to pass the news back first. They had been out for so long, but they had not sent back any news. He did not know how anxious Wei Ci and the others were. Yes. Because Yang Tao had ordered them to turn around, the boatman also tried his best to row the oar. The boat moved very fast. The oncoming wind from the river slapped his face. For a moment, he sobered up from his drunkenness. He only felt perturbed and worried. Night fell, and the last ray of the afterglow fell into the horizon. Yang Tao could only ask the guards to light a torch. They followed the traces left by Jiang Pengji and found the dense forest. Wait, what is this smell? Yang Tao's nose was more sensitive. Before the group entered the dense forest, they could already smell the familiar smell of blood. He couldn't believe it and tried to sniff. The closer he got, the stronger the smell of blood became. Under the light of the torch, the guard also found that there were many traces of human activity in the forest, such as messy footsteps and bushes and weeds that were crushed by heavy objects. Yang Tao looked at the depth of the footsteps and the degree of dryness of the soil. He was sure that these footsteps were left here recently. There were many people. The more he looked, the more frightened he became. Yang Tao couldn't tell what his current state of mind was, because his mind had gone blank. Search. Search for all of them. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. Yang Tao was suppressing his emotions that were about to go out of control, but the hoarseness in his voice exposed his inner thoughts. Not long after, the guard came back to report that a corpse had been eaten by wild beasts in the forest. Yang Tao hurried over and found a few corpses on the ground that had been dragged and eaten by wild beasts. Heads, torsos, limbs. Every part of the body with more muscle and fat had been eaten by the hungry beasts. The white bones under the skin and flesh were exposed. It made one's scalp go numb. The clothes of the deceased were also eaten by wild beasts, but from the remains of the skeleton and clothes, it could be determined that it was a man. It's not my lord. As soon as the guard finished speaking, Yang Tao replied. I'm not blind. I can tell if it's a man or a woman. Who are these people? Could they be men of sacrifice? He guessed correctly. The guard said solemnly, according to the traces left on these corpses, they are indeed well-trained men of sacrifice. These corpses haven't started to stink. The corpses are slightly hardened, and the blood is fresh. I estimate that they died less than half an hour ago. Less than half an hour ago? Didn't that mean that they died not long ago? Yang Tao's face was darker than the night. A group of men of sacrifice who had just died appeared here, and it happened to be a sensitive time when Jiang Pengji was alone. How could he not be worried? Whether it was Yang Tao or the guards, they all knew that Jiang Pengji had most likely been assassinated. However, there were no traces of her yet. They couldn't determine whether she was unscathed, injured and hidden, or, unfortunately dead. He didn't dare to delay. Except for 2 guards, the others were sent to look for Jiang Pengji. The guards followed the traces of the wild beasts dragging the corpses and found the place where the scuffle had taken place. There were more corpses here. When the guards arrived, there were pairs of glowing eyes in the darkness. Everyone saw the scene clearly with the help of the torch and suddenly gasped. This was a group of wild wolves that hadn't eaten their fill since the beginning of winter. They were probably attracted by the smell of blood from the corpses and ate their fill from the corpses. When the crowd approached, those with sharp ears could even hear the stirring sound of the wild wolves' sharp teeth gnawing on human flesh and bones. Probably because they had eaten their fill, the leader of the wolf pack didn't want to fight with the guards. The 2 sides were in a stalemate for a while. Then, with a howl, the wolf pack left. Looking at the pairs of glowing eyes disappearing into the darkness, 2 of the guards came back to their senses and were shocked to find that they were covered in sweat. When the cold wind blew, their sweaty skin turned cold. It was so cold that they couldn't help but shiver. Yang Tao rushed over when he heard the news. Looking at the messy scene, his expression was extremely solemn. "Did you find any traces of Lord Lu?" The guard said. The fatal injuries on the men of sacrifice were all left by the long sword. Every slash was so neat and sharp. Only the god-slaying sword in the Lord's hand can do that. We checked the surrounding area for miles. Other than these men of sacrifice, we didn't find any traces of the Lord. Yang Tao said, "Where is she?" "You didn't find Lord Lu?" The guard hesitated for a while and said, "Perhaps. The Lord has already gone back." Yang Tao pointed at the corpses all over the ground and said, "A rough estimate is at least 100 people. Do you think these men of sacrifice are useless?" In his opinion, even if Jiang Pengji was still alive, she was most likely injured and hiding somewhere. They had to find her quickly. The leader of the guards blinked and said hesitantly, "Perhaps, they are really useless." "You're still arguing with me?" Yang Tao was furious at the guards who were not skilled in their work. Jiang Pengji was one of the most powerful dukes in the world. Couldn't she find a group of professional and responsible guards? What are these meticulously trained men of sacrifice doing? What are you guys doing? Eating rotten rice? Hurry up and find them. He was so angry that he was going to have a heart attack. The guards had no choice but to continue their search. But they searched all over the mountain and found no traces of their lord. If she was really injured and hiding, shouldn't she have left some clues for them to follow? Yang Tao fed the mosquitoes for half the night. Jiang Pengji leisurely strolled home on her horse. She hadn't even sat down for long when Yan Lin came to ask for her. Chapter 1628. Jiang Pengji chatted with salted fish along the way. When she returned, the sky was completely dark. She didn't turn off the streaming room. Instead, she gossiped with them to kill time. The chef in the residence served the dishes that had been kept warm. Jiang Pengji wasn't picky. There were 6 meat dishes, 3 vegetable dishes, and 2 soup dishes. She ate like a table full of people. Especially when the maid served the rice buckets that were the size of a wash basin, the bullet screen was stunned. Aod Lemming, a day apart feels like 3 years, but the streamer has turned into a rice bucket. Who eats with a wash basin as a unit of measurement? 7 or 8 strong men might not be able to finish the rice alone. Her appetite is really shocking. Tudu Feichio, sigh, the streamer didn't have such a big appetite in the past. I saw her eat 1.5 rice buckets for lunch with my own eyes. I used my wash basin to measure it. TSK. This is probably a real rice bucket. Kissing Kekiongtang, if the streamer transmigrates to our world one day, I suggest she become a foodie streamer. It's much better than the Palace Intrigue streaming room that sells dog meat. The Palace Intrigue that I've been looking forward to for more than 10 years has actually disappeared. What was the equivalent of this operation? It was equivalent to a web novel that had been serialized for 1,600 pages and had yet to enter the main topic. Be careful that the readers didn't finish it. Handsome lowly, how can you say that? If my streamer really transmigrates, will she still be a foodie streamer? Do you think the food that a foodie streamer eats is free? Does the streaming equipment cost money? If she was willing to give the baby a kiss, it would really be free. It wasn't the first time Jiang Pengji was complained about her large appetite. It couldn't be helped. This body needed more and more energy every day as she trained and grew over the years. The energy contained in ordinary food couldn't keep up with the body's needs, so she could only rely on quantity to make up for quality. Anyway, she was a feudal lord. Even if she ate 10 or 20 basin-sized rice buckets for a meal, she could still afford it. At that moment, Jiang Pengji saw a complaint that was trending. Jing Ying, fortunately, we didn't go to the Palace Intrigue. With the streamer's appetite, any emperor would be scared to retreat, right? According to the Palace Intrigue dramas they watched, wasn't the Empress a cat's stomach? Jiang Pengji's figure was indeed quite good, but she had a good appetite. Imagine if the emperor came to the back palace to have a meal with her. The emperor would reservedly eat half a bowl of rice, but Jiang Pengji would finish all the dishes and gobble down 2 buckets of rice. No matter how beautiful she was or how powerful she was, the emperor would be so scared that he wouldn't be able to get hard, right? Jiang Pengji was amused by the comment. If she didn't have enough self-control, she might have spat out the rice and affected her appetite. When they finished half a bucket of rice, a servant reported that Yan Lin was outside the manor and asked to see her. Jiang Pengji let him in. When Yan Lin arrived, he saw Jiang Pengji holding a bowl in her left hand and a pair of chopsticks in her right. The maids were scooping rice for her. Each bowl was piled high with rice grains. The man looked up at him with an innocent and confused look, as if he was asking Yan Lin why he was here. Have you eaten? Jiang Pengji asked familiarly, then immediately corrected herself. I mean, have you eaten? Yan Lin tried his best to ignore the empty rice bucket and said calmly, I've used it in the mansion. Oh, then why are you looking for me? Jiang Pengji didn't like people interrupting her when she was eating and disrupting the flow of her meal. Yan Lin said seriously, do you know where Xiaoyang went? I heard that he went out with Xiaoyang this afternoon. The system in this era was a pain in the ass. An official's official was not necessarily an official's official. Yan Lin was loyal to Yang Tao, so he was Yang Tao's official, not Jiang Pengji's. Because of Yang Tao's special status, Jiang Pengji didn't mind calling him Lord, but Yang Tao felt uncomfortable, so he used Lord Lu instead. Of course, other than Lord Lu, others could also call her Lord of Liuzhou, Lord Lanting, or Lord Ming. There were many ways to address her, but Jiang Pengji's officials and generals all liked to call her Lord. They had gotten used to it after so many years. Yan Lin and the others followed Yang Tao's lead and called her Lord Lu, so Jiang Pengji let them be. I'll just make do with it. What else can I do? Jiang Pengji was surprised by Yan Lin's question. Xiaoyang didn't come back? I don't think so. He left before me, and he took the water route. Yan Lin looked serious. If I may ask, what did Lord Lu and Xiaoyang do in the afternoon? Jiang Pengji said, drink. What else could they have done? Yan Lin was speechless. Jiang Pengji continued, Xiaoyang can't hold his liquor well. He got drunk after 2 jars of hard liquor. I asked the guards to escort him up the river and came back first. I took the land route and hunted some wild animals along the way. I caught 2 ungrateful animals alive and wasted a lot of time on the road. Calculating the distance, Xiao Yang should have more than enough time to take a bath and take a nap. Why hasn't he come back yet? Yan Lin said seriously, I've searched everywhere, but I still haven't found any trace of Xiaoyang. Jiang Pengji's expression changed. Did something happen to Yan Lin? Just in case, the ambushing death warriors not only set up an ambush in the forest, but also on the river? She put down her bowl and chopsticks and led Yan Lin to find Wei Xi and the others. They were looking for Jiang Pengji as well. Why are you looking for me? Wei Xi, Feng Zhen, and the others were livid. It was fine that his lord had slipped away, and it was fine that she had brought Yang Tao to swim and drink with him, but she had actually ditched her guards and was alone. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Oh no, she was exposed. After figuring out the whole story, Feng Zhen and the others sent someone to inform Yang Tao, who was feeding mosquitoes in the forest, to come back. As soon as Yang Tao came back, they couldn't hide anything. For example, the Lord had ditched the guards and was alone, or, the Lord had been ambushed by hundreds of men of sacrifice. Jiang Pengji was sitting in the main seat, but she had the illusion that she was being interrogated by 3 courts. She glared at Yang Tao, but he lowered his head and scratched the swelling on the back of his hand. The forest was too dirty. Even though there were no mosquitoes in this season, there were other insects. If one was not careful and got bitten, the skin that was exposed to the air would also swell. The more he scratched, the more itchy it was. Yan Lin secretly passed him a small bottle of ointment. If General Yang hadn't come back, when would the Lord have told us about the ambush? Wei Xi seemed to be angry, and his aura was especially strong. Jiang Pengji was in the wrong, so she couldn't help but feel guilty. I was going to talk about it after dinner. Speaking of which, she hadn't finished her meal because of Yan Lin's interruption. Wei Xi was choked by her answer. She was being ambushed by hundreds of men of sacrifice, and she was thinking about talking about it after dinner? Chapter 1629. Wei Xi tried hard to keep the expression on his face, but the idle spectators could read something else from his expression. Tudu Feiqiu, Zixiao's feelings right now are probably indescribable. He's smiling on the outside and maintaining his gentle appearance, but he's probably cursing inside. There was a saying that went, even if the person you chose is mentally retarded, you still have to kneel down and assist him. Hong Kong Guazaran, the streamer's operation is so sexy. Beauty Ci really loves the streamer by not punching her to death. Guatianli, since all of you are pitying Beauty Ci, then I will pity the unlucky force that sent out the assassins. They were ambitious and wanted to take the host's life, but they never expected that the host's mind was only thinking about food. At the very least, he should respect the antagonist. He was quite serious about his work. Warrior rose. Maybe the poor villain is waiting for the good news that the host is seriously injured or dead? The salted fish rejoiced in her misfortune. They knew Jiang Pengji's combat ability best. 100 or so kamikaze warriors could only make up one PUBG match. Did they really think they could kill her with such a small scale? What a joke. Even if Jiang Pengji was thrown in front of 99 cheats, they would still be able to win the game unscathed, let alone such a weak game. Therefore, the salted fishes giggled and copied a few bullet screen comments. Rue Yunhui, host, don't be a coward. You're the head of a family and an old woman. What's the point of being afraid of your wife? Xingyuan Miao Miao, host, stay where you are and don't move. I will buy you the sharpest durian, the most uncomfortable keyboard, and the longest washboard. I guarantee that you will kneel comfortably and sincerely. Maybe C.I. Marin will allow you to climb onto the bed because you are serious. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Were these salted fishes fans or haters of her? Or was it that the deeper the fan went, the darker it became? Even though salted fish cheered her on and encouraged her, Jiang Pengji was still a little cowardly when faced with the angry Wei Ci. When it came to matters of principle, she was naturally the one who had the final say. Wei Ci would also not argue with her on such matters, but when it came to trivial matters or logistics, Wei Ci was usually the one who had the final say. Jiang Pengji rarely argued with Wei Ci because of such things. Wei Ci's character also determined that he would not easily get angry. However, the more good-tempered a person was, the more oppressive their aura would be when they were angry. Jiang Pengji was at fault in the first place, so she was terrified. Not only that, she even tried to blink her eyes and act cute to get away with it. I really planned to talk about this after dinner. Jiang Pengji's voice became softer and softer as she spoke. She looked as if she had been wronged. Feng Zhen sighed. He couldn't bear to see Wei Ci being too forceful and causing his relationship with his lord to become strained, so he spoke up to interrupt. Has the lord finished eating? Jiang Pengji shook her head and said, No, I'm only 30% full. When everyone heard the words only 30% full, they subconsciously felt a little moved. Their lord was still hungry. However, when he thought about his lord's appetite, even if this 30% full was a few bowls of rice, Yang Tao muttered in a low voice, being controlled like this, not even having enough to eat, this lord is really aggrieved. Yan Lin rolled his eyes at Yang Tao and sneered. At least he ate more than half a bucket of rice. Don't talk about eating dinner, you've been feeding the worm blood for the whole night. Yang Tao was speechless. He always felt that after he became the lord, the frequency of his companions criticizing him had increased. It wasn't like this in the past. Even though Jiang Pengji wasn't full, they wouldn't let her go back to eat before coming back to settle the matter of the ambush. Ordinary gentry families couldn't have mobilized such a large number of men of sacrifice. If Jiang Pengji didn't handle it well, it would intimidate the thieves and evildoers. In the future, all kinds of monsters would dare to mess with the Lord. In order to make an example out of others, the assassination had to be cleansed with blood. Yang Si didn't think it was messy enough. He laughed and said, It's just a bunch of unruly people. Even after mobilizing more than 100 men of sacrifice, they couldn't hurt the Lord at all. The assassination has become a joke. Why should the Lord care about them? In comparison, the Lord's meal is more important. Why don't you go to the back hall and have your meal first? We'll wait for you here. We'll discuss matters after the Lord finishes eating. Jiang Pengji's mouth twitched. She wanted to kick Yang Si. Did this guy want to see the world in chaos? Yang Si's every word sounded like flattery, but in fact, he was adding fuel to the fire and ridiculing her. How could Jiang Pengji dare to eat? She said seriously, No need. Business is more important. Yang Si smiled meaningfully. Wei Ci's expression softened slightly. Feng Zhen asked, Does the Lord have live assassins? I caught 2 alive and threw them to the subordinates to deal with. I reckon we'll have good news soon. Although the captured men of sacrifice would commit suicide to keep it a secret, with Jiang Pengji around, how could she let them succeed so easily? The 2 survivors were caught before they could commit suicide. Sometimes, living a life worse than death was more terrifying than death. Even if these men of sacrifice were well trained, they would still spit out the truth under torture. Coincidentally, as soon as Jiang Pengji finished speaking, someone came to report that the 2 survivors had confessed. Jiang Pengji asked, Confessed? Who instructed them to ambush me? The person replied, The Nan family of Fan Prefecture, Nansheng. Jiang Pengji crossed her arms and asked uninterestedly, The Nan family? Fan Prefecture? I dug up their graves. Why are you making things difficult for me? Wei Ci and the others stared with their eyes wide open. How thick-skinned was their lord to ask such a question? Not only did you dig up their graves, but you also confiscated half of their savings. It would be strange if the Nan family didn't fight to the death. However, they couldn't say this out loud. After all, the Lord still had to save face. Compared to Feng Zhen and the others' brainless protection, Yang Tao and the others reacted more normally. They didn't dare to say it out loud, but they were still muttering in their hearts. Why? Because the order was given by Jiang Pengji, but part of the specific operation was done by Yang Tao's old subordinates, especially the confiscation of the family's assets. Although Yang Tao and the others had a good time and took the opportunity to take revenge for the betrayal of the Nanxing aristocrats, they had also completely offended them. If not, Yan Lin and the others wouldn't have called Jiang Pengji by her name in private. Yang Tao had offended the Nanxing aristocrats, and Dongqing had no foundation. The slightest possibility of rebellion was nipped in the bud. In the future, no matter how Jiang Pengji developed, Yang Tao could only rely on her. He couldn't have the heart to rebel. The Nan family of Fan Prefecture belonged to the aristocrats in Nanxing. They used legal and illegal means to enclose thousands of acres of fertile land. When starving people were everywhere in the outside world, their granary was so rich that it could fatten up countless rats. They had countless tenants under their name. Their savings couldn't even be compared to the former national treasury. Jiang Pengji gave them a knife. The fat she cut off was richer than that of the Tao family, who ran the illicit salt business. They were rich. If Jiang Pengji didn't take advantage of them, who would she take advantage of? They jumped back and forth between her and the other feudal lords. She just took the opportunity to confiscate half of their family's assets and dig up a few graves. That was enough. Digging up graves was indeed immoral. Unfortunately, she was a penniless bandit. She did unusual things at unusual times. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.